Who doesn't miss the days when Sunday nights were sacred? I'm talking, of course, about the absolute phenomenon that was Game of Thrones. We laughed, we theorized all week long, and, let's be honest, we got seriously mad at that controversial ending. But one thing's for sure, Westeros made its mark on pop culture with dragons, political scheming, and that old habit of killing off our favorite characters when we least expected it. But the story of this universe goes way beyond Jon Snow's battles, or Cersei's thirst for power. The real madness begins nearly 200 years earlier, at the height of House Targaryen's brutal and glorious reign, right where House of the Dragon comes in. And that brings us to today's crazy idea. We're not just going to watch one show, we're building the ultimate complete timeline. We'll start with the savage dance of the dragons, watch the dynasty tear itself apart, and follow the events chronologically all the way up to the original Game of Thrones storyline. This is the whole saga, connecting a glorious past to a grim future, all in one go. So buckle up, because today is all about fire, blood, and some seriously messy royal drama. The drama kicks off in 101 AC, with the Lords of Westeros in a sort of Big Brother setup to choose the next heir to the Iron Throne. Since King Jaehaerys' sons had died, there was the eldest granddaughter, Rhaenys Targaryen, and the eldest grandson, Viserys Targaryen. Guess who they picked? Yep, the guy. We can already see the patriarchy is going strong. We jump to 9 years after Viserys became king. We meet his daughter, Rhaenyra, arriving in full Daenerys style, flying her dragon Syrax over the city. She meets up with her friend, Alicent Hightower, and then goes to visit her mother, Queen Aemma, who is heavily pregnant and sick and tired of birthing heirs. At the small council meeting, Lord Corlys Velaryon is freaking out about some pirates in the Stepstones, but everyone else is more worried about the open bar for the tournament King Viserys planned for the birth of his future son. Speaking of people who don't give a damn, we meet Daemon, the king's brother. The guy is found lounging on the Iron Throne, chilling like it's his living room sofa. He chats in High Valyrian with Rhaenyra, and you can tell he's the edgy rock star uncle of the family. Later, he and his new city watch go on a night of terror, chop thieves' hands and worse. Otto, the Hand of the King, complains, but Daemon thinks he's a vigilante. The tournament begins, and at the same time, Queen Aemma goes into labor. Things go wrong. Very wrong. Viserys has to choose between saving the mother or the baby in a brutal medieval C-section. In the end, he loses his wife and the newborn son Balon. To make matters worse, Daemon goes to a and makes a toast mocking his dead nephew, calling the baby the heir for a day. Viserys goes mad with rage, calls his brother for a historic showdown, exiles him from the kingdom, and, in a twist, names Rhaenyra his official heir. He also reveals a secret about a prophecy called A Song of Ice and Fire, which is basically the script for a future war against the White Walkers. 6 months later, we meet who we'll refer to as Crab Feeder, because he literally sailors to the shore to be eaten by crabs, a villain with very specific hobbies. Back in the throne room, Corlys Velaryon is foaming at the mouth because the crab feeder has already sunk 4 of his ships. Rhaenyra, who's no fool, suggests sending the dragons to solve the problem, but her dad tells her to choose a new guard, basically saying, "Go play, kiddo," and she picks the only guy who's actually seen a real fight, Sir Criston Cole. Meanwhile, some bizarre matchmaking is going on. Corlys and his wife Rhaenys try to push their daughter Laena, a 12-year-old girl, onto King Viserys. The king is obviously super uncomfortable. He's more interested in chatting with Alicent, Rhaenyra's friend. Speaking of the devil, Uncle Daemon, who isn't playing around, has occupied Dragonstone, stolen a dragon egg, and announced he's having a baby with his mistress, Mysaria. Ota Hightower goes there to scold him, but Daemon almost calls his dragon, Caraxes, to settle it with violence. Out of nowhere, Rhaenyra shows up on her own dragon, Syrax. She stares down her uncle in an epic scene, and he, kind of chickening out, returns the egg and leaves. After that, Viserys realizes he needs to remarry to secure the line, and in front of everyone, he announces he's going to marry Alicent Hightower, Rhaenyra's best friend. The tension is instant, and the look of betrayal on Rhaenyra's face is priceless. Corlys, feeling betrayed for the second time, goes to find the only other guy who's fed up with the king, Daemon. He proposes an alliance to go conquer the Stepstones by themselves and prove they aren't pushovers. 3 years have passed. Alicent has already had a son one with Viserys, Aegon, and at the kid's birthday party, the crowd is already shouting Aegon II, totally ignoring that Rhaenyra is the heir. To celebrate, the royal family goes on a hunt in the Kingswood. The atmosphere is incredibly heavy. A stuck-up Lannister, Jason, tries to hit on Rhaenyra, practically offering a castle in exchange for marriage. She gets so pissed off that she argues with her father and flees into the woods on horseback. Sir Criston Cole, her bodyguard, goes after her. Deep in the woods, there's a moment of venting between the two, until a giant boar attacks. Rhaenyra, filled with rage, the beast repeatedly, ending up drenched in blood. Meanwhile, back at camp, Viserys is drinking his face off. Otto has the brilliant idea to suggest marrying Rhaenyra to her own little brother, the toddler Aegon. The king obviously thinks it's disgusting. The Great Hunt was meant to catch a mystical white hart, a sign of royalty. The king's team only finds a common stag, but Rhaenyra, alone in the forest, finds the actual white hart and lets it go. Symbolic, right? Cut to the war in the Stepstones. 3 years of fighting and things are looking bad for Daemon and Corlys. News arrives that his brother Viserys is sending help, and instead of being happy, Daemon snaps. He beats the messenger, furious at the idea of being saved, so he decides to handle it solo. He feigns surrender, lures the crab feeder's army into a trap, and starts the carnage. Just when he's about to be defeated by a rain of arrows, Laenor Velaryon swoops in on a dragon, turning the tide. Daemon invades the villain's cave and comes out dragging the guy. About a year has passed, and Rhaenyra is like the royal bachelorette, only hating every second of it. She's on a tour of the kingdom to pick a husband, but the suitors are a collection of old men, children, and irrelevant lords. Her patience is so thin that when 2 kids from rival families start fighting in front of her, it turns into a pint-sized duel of the titans. One of them ends up in and the other vomits from nerves, while Rhaenyra and her bodyguard, Sir Criston Cole, simply turn their backs and walk away, asking to ready the ship back home. She is done. On the way home, who shows up? Uncle Daemon, buzzing her ship with his dragon Top Gun style. He returns to court after 4 years, wearing a bone crown and calling himself the King of the Narrow Sea. He arrives and kneels to his brother. There's a family hug, and only Otto Hightower looks like he swallowed a lemon. Later, Daemon decides his niece needs to see real life and takes her on a clandestine night out through King's Landing, disguised as commoners. There are jugglers, puppet shows mocking the royal family, and to cap off the night, There, things heat up between uncle and niece, but Daemon backs out at the last second, leaving Rhaenyra completely high and dry. Frustrated and full of desire, she goes back to the castle and decides her handsome bodyguard Sir Criston is going to have to solve her problem, and he does. But a spy saw the princess at the brothel and ran to tell Otto, who told Viserys. Alicent, the new queen and Rhaenyra's ex-best friend, hears everything. Rhaenyra lies to Alicent, swearing on her mother's memory that nothing happened with her uncle. Viserys confronts Rhaenyra, forces her to marry Laenor Velaryon to unite the houses, and reveals the secret of the Targaryen dagger regarding the prince that was promised. Rhaenyra accepts, but on one condition: fire Otto. To seal the deal, the king sends her some contraceptive tea, just to be safe. Zero trust. Meanwhile, Daemon goes off to handle a little marital problem. He meets his wife, Rhea Royce, in the middle of nowhere, and after trading barbs, we understand that solving means killing her with a rock. Boom. Now he's the most eligible and dangerous bachelor in Westeros. Meanwhile, King Viserys, whose health is weaker than a Wi-Fi signal, travels to the Velaryon Island to ask for their son Laenor's hand for Rhaenyra. It's the king groveling to his vassal. After a bit of theater, the deal is sealed. Later, Rhaenyra and Laenor, super modern, make a pact. They marry, fulfill the duty of producing heirs, and then each continues with their own flings. Laenor is super happy and goes to celebrate with his boyfriend Joffrey. But not everyone is happy. Sir Criston Cole, the guard who had his night of glory with Rhaenyra, confesses his love and proposes they run away together. She coldly refuses, offering him the position of official lover. The guy is devastated, feeling like he threw his honor in the trash for nothing. Meanwhile, Alicent discovers, through the master gossiper Larys Strong, that Rhaenyra received the contraceptive tea. She realizes her friend lied. Worse, she confronts Criston, thinking the culprit was Daemon, and he confesses, "It was me." Alicent's good girl mask finally falls off. The wedding feast begins, and the atmosphere is heavier than a Christmas dinner gone gone wrong, Daemon shows up uninvited, and in the middle of the king's speech, Alicent enters late, wearing a green dress, which is basically her family's war color. She declared war without saying a word. To make matters worse, Laenor's boyfriend Joffrey figures out Rhaenyra's affair with Criston and tries to make an informal alliance. Terrible idea. Criston snaps and beats Joffrey to death in front of everyone. The party ends and the wedding is done in a rush, in a private ceremony, while the groom cries over his dead boyfriend and the king collapses. What a wedding, huh? 10 years have passed. Rhaenyra has just had her third child, and Queen Alicent demands to see the baby immediately, just to be spiteful. Why? Because none of her 3 sons, Jace, Luke, and the newborn Joffrey, have silver hair like their father, Laenor. They all have dark hair, just like the commander of the City Watch, Harwin Strong. Biggest coincidence in the world, right? Nobody buys it. Alicent's sons, Aegon and Aemond, are already teenagers. Aemond gets bullied for being the only one without a dragon, and the other boys give him a pig with wings, the Pink Dread. Alicent is furious and tries to drill into her eldest son Aegon's head that he should be king, not the bastard nephews. On the other side of the world, Daemon married Laena Velaryon and had 2 daughters, but he's bored with the exiled lord life. Things get tragic when Laena has a complicated labor and, preferring a warrior's death, orders her dragon, Vhagar, to incinerate her. Back in King's Landing, the tension finally explodes. In the training yard, Criston Cole provokes Harwin Strong about the paternity of Rhaenyra's children. Harwin can't take it and beats the crap out of Criston in front of everyone. As a result, Harwin and his father, the Hand of the King, are sent away to Harrenhal. This is where Larys Clubfoot Strong, Harwin's younger brother, goes full psycho mode. He hires some thugs to burn down the castle and kill his own father and brother. He does this to help Alicent, clearing the path for her father to return to power. Alicent is terrified by his coldness. Rhaenyra, realizing the walls are closing in, decides to take her children and move to Dragonstone, far from the intrigue. The Cold War between the 2 women has turned into an iceberg. Everyone gathers at Driftmark for one of the most awkward funerals in history, Laena Velaryon's. The Velaryon family is devastated, but Laena's uncle, Vaemond, decides it's the perfect moment to throw some very direct shade in Valyrian, saying Velaryon blood needs to remain pure, while shooting daggers with his eyes at Rhaenyra's sons, who, let's be honest, look nothing like their supposed father Laenor. The moment is so ridiculous that even Daemon, Laena's widower, can't help but chuckle. After the funeral, there's a wake that is the definition of an awkward fest. Rhaenyra and Alicent barely look at each other, since the gossip that Rhaenyra's kids are Harwin Strong's bastards is running wild. To make it worse, Daemon is back in Westeros after a decade, bringing the daughters who never met the rest of the family. Jaehaerys, Rhaenyra's eldest, has already figured out Harwin was his real dad and is suffering in silence. Meanwhile, Aemond, Alicent's son, is the only one without a dragon and has his eye on Vhagar, the giant she-dragon that belonged to Laena and is now alone. That night, the kid decides it's his time. He goes to the beach, finds Vhagar, who is basically a sleeping kaiju, and, with sheer guts, tries to tame the beast. After almost getting incinerated, he succeeds. Aemond now has the biggest dragon in the world. But the joy is short-lived. Laena's daughters and Rhaenyra's sons show up and the brawl begins. Aemond calls his cousins Strongs, and the fight gets serious. In the middle of the confusion, little Lucerys grabs a knife and slash. The entire court is woken up to sort out the mess. Alicent snaps, demanding an eye for an eye. King Viserys tries to restore order, but Alicent completely loses her mind, grabs the king's dagger, and lunges at Lucerys. Rhaenyra steps in to protect her son and ends up with a nasty cut on her arm. From then on, it was clear, peace was never an option. Seeing all this chaos, Rhaenyra and Daemon realize they need to unite. They hatch a brilliant plan, fake Laenor's death, allowing him to run away with his lover, and with that, clear the way to marry each other, cementing their alliance for good. 6 years have passed, and the situation is only getting worse. Lord Corlys Velaryon, the Sea Snake, is in bad shape after a battle, and his brother Vaemond sees a golden opportunity to take Driftmark for himself, claiming Lucerys is a bastard and has no rights. Rhaenyra and Daemon rush to King's Landing to defend the boys' claim, but they find a depressing scene. The castle has been redecorated with religious symbols, and King Viserys looks like a zombie straight out of The Walking Dead, doped up on milk of the poppy and barely recognizing his own children. Alicent and Otto are clearly in charge, ready to judge the succession of Driftmark. Rhaenyra tries everything. She proposes marrying her sons to Rhaenys' granddaughters to secure support, but the queen who never was doesn't seem very convinced. Desperate, Rhaenyra goes to her father, and in a rare rare moment of lucidity, Viserys understands what is at stake. On the day of the trial, Otto sits on the Iron Throne, ready to hand the victory to Vaemond. But when all seems lost, the doors open. Viserys, dragging himself like a true hero on his final mission, enters the hall. With Daemon's help, he climbs the throne and reaffirms that Lucerys is the heir. Vaemond, blinded by hate, explodes. He calls Lucerys a bastard and Rhaenyra a in front of everyone. Before Viserys can react, Daemon draws his sword and strikes Vaemond without mercy. Later, Viserys organizes a family dinner, a last attempt at peace. For a moment, it looks like it might work. Rhaenyra and Alicent exchange toasts, and the younger ones dance. But the peace is short-lived. Serve a roasted pig in front of Aemond and the spark ignites again. Later, Viserys, delirious with pain on his deathbed and confusing Alicent for Rhaenyra, starts mumbling about Aegon the Conqueror's prophecy. Alicent only hears the name Aegon and gets it all wrong, thinking the king is naming their son, Aegon, as his successor. With his dying words, Viserys, unintentionally, just kicked off a civil war. King Viserys is dead. In the middle of the night, the news reaches Alicent, who runs to tell her father, Otto. She tells him about the king's final words, and the coup begins. The small council gathers, and it becomes clear that most were already planning to betray Rhaenyra. Lord Beesbury, the only one who protests against this charade, is silenced forever by Criston Cole in a burst of rage. The Lord Commander of the King's Guard, Harold Westerling, seeing the farce the court has become, throws his white cloak on the floor and quits. Decency has left the room. Otto wants to eliminate Rhaenyra and her family, but Alicent, in a rare moment of conscience, insists on giving her the chance to surrender. Meanwhile, the search for the future king begins. Aegon has vanished, and no one is surprised, since the playboy prince would rather spend his time in than think about ruling. Criston Cole and Aemond go looking for the wayward prince, while Otto negotiates with Mysaria, the White Worm, who is hiding Aegon and demands an end to the child fights in exchange for the information. Meanwhile, Rhaenys, the queen who never was, is locked in her chambers. Alicent tries to convince her to support the Greens, but Rhaenys doesn't buy it. She knows Alicent is just perpetuating the same sexist system that kept her from power. Fortunately, a knight loyal to Rhaenyra, Sir Eric, helps Rhaenys escape. They get lost in the crowd being herded to the dragon pit for Aegon's coronation. In the middle of the ceremony, as the crown is placed on the reluctant Aegon's head, the floor of the dragon pit shakes. Out of nowhere, Meleys, the red dragon, bursts from underground, with Rhaenys on her back, dressed for war. Chaos ensues. She stops right in front of Alicent, Otto, and the new king. The moment is tense. A simple Dracarys would end the war before it even started. But Rhaenys, in an act of mercy, or maybe just to show who's boss, decides not to incinerate them. She stares at Alicent with a look that says, "See you around," and flies away, likely straight to Dragonstone, to warn Rhaenyra that the Game of Thrones has turned into open war. Rhaenyra Targaryen, heavily pregnant, finds her son Lucerys feeling like the biggest imposter in the realm, convinced he doesn't deserve to be the Lord of the Tides. Rhaenyra gives him a pep talk, admitting she felt the exact same way when she was named heir and promising to prepare him. But this tender moment is cut short. Rhaenys arrives, and she's not bringing gossip, she's bringing the apocalypse. She reveals that King Viserys is dead and that Aegon, Rhaenyra's half-brother, has been crowned in her place. Daemon goes instantly ballistic and accuses Alicent of having the old man offed. Rhaenys explains she was held captive in her chambers while the Greens plotted their coup and only managed to escape at the last minute. Daemon is outraged, asking why she didn't take the chance to barbecue the Greens right then and there. But Rhaenys drops a truth bomb. That war wasn't hers to start. The shock of the news is so severe that Rhaenyra goes into premature labor and, tragically, delivers a daughter. While Rhaenyra deals with her grief, Daemon switches into total war mode. The mood only lifts slightly when Ser Eric, a defecting Kingsguard, shows up bringing the late king's crown. Daemon wastes no time, placing the crown on his wife's head and proclaiming her queen. Later, Otto Hightower arrives offering some bogus peace terms, basically saying Rhaenyra can keep Dragonstone if she accepts Aegon as king. Daemon is ready to rip the old man's throat out. In a heated argument, Rhaenyra cites the Song of Ice and Fire prophecy, but Daemon couldn't care less and revealing that Viserys never trusted him enough to share that secret. The tide turns when a recovered Corlys Velaryon decides to back Rhaenyra, bringing his fleet to blockade the capital. The Blacks' plan is set. Jace and Luke will fly as messengers to seek support from the Starks, Arryns, and Baratheons. Meanwhile, Daemon tries to pull a Pokemon master move and attempts to tame Vermithor, a giant riderless dragon. But the episode's climax belongs to poor Luke. He arrives at Storm's End, only to run smack into Aemond. Lord Boros Baratheon is a jerk and refuses Rhaenyra's request. To make matters worse, Aemond demands one of Luke's eyes as payment for what he lost in childhood. Luke flees, but Aemond chases him through a storm, just to troll him. However, the dragons lose control, and Vhagar, in an act of pure fury, simply chomps Aurochs and Lucerys. Aemond is left in shock, realizing the massive screw-up he just made. Daemon whispers the news into Rhaenyra's ear. Her face shifts from grief to a look of pure thirst for vengeance. Jace Velaryon is chatting with Lord Cragen Stark up at the wall. Cragen can't send his whole army south, but he agrees to send some graybeards, war veterans who fear nothing. It's in the middle of this negotiation that the news of Luke's death arrives, hitting Jace like a punch to the gut. On Dragonstone, Daemon wants to form a party with Rhaenys to farm Vhagar, Aemon's dragon, but she, exhausted, refuses and throws a "pity you aren't the king" right in his face. In King's Landing, life goes on. Weirdly, Alicent and Criston Cole are having a fling. At the Green Council, Aegon wants to fly out and burn everyone with his dragon, but Alicent holds him back, insisting they need the dragons to defend the city. Meanwhile, Larys Strong, the Clubfoot, cleans the castle of spies and fills the place with his own agents, leaving Alicent suspicious. Rhaenyra herself, after days of searching, finds a piece of Arrax's wing and Luke's cloak. It's the confirmation she needed. The scene is heartbreaking. Back at the castle, Aegon tries to be a good king, listening to the small folks' petitions, but his grandfather Otto corrects him every 5 seconds. That's when Larys plants a seed of discord, suggesting Aegon doesn't need his grandfather's handholding. The breaking point comes when Rhaenyra returns to Dragonstone. With a hollow stare, she ignores everyone and says a single phrase that defines the future of the war: "I want Aemon Targaryen." Jace returns from his mission and collapses into his mother's arms, weeping for his brother. Daemon, meanwhile, cuts a deal with Mysaria, the White Worm, freedom in exchange for hot intel on King's Landing. With her contacts, he hires 2 assassins, nicknamed Blood and Cheese, to infiltrate the Red Keep with a clear mission: kill Aemond. The problem is, they can't find him. Not wanting to leave empty-handed, they break into Queen Helena's room. Following the order of a son for a son, they force her to point out which of her children is the boy. In a panic, she points to the heir, Jaehaerys, who is brutally murdered. In shock, Helaena runs to her mother's room and catches Alicent in the act with Criston Cole. She simply says, "They killed the boy." The news of Prince Jaehaerys' murder drops like a bomb on the Red Keep. Aegon too, blinded by rage, totally loses it and smashes his father's model of Valyria. Ota Hightower, the master of political spin, already hatches a plan. Use the grandson's death to paint Rhaenyra as a villain and organize a public funeral to win the people's sympathy. But Aegon isn't in the mood for games. He beats one of the assassins to death and in a fit of genius, orders all the ratcatchers in the castle to be hanged, since the other accomplice was one of them. Otto is shocked by the stupidity and calls his grandson a fool to his face. The fight escalates. Aegon gets tired of his grandfather's diplomacy, fires him as Hand of the King, and names Criston Cole in his place, his steel fist. Criston, for his part, already had a twisted plan in motion, sending Ser Arryk to infiltrate Dragonstone, disguised as his twin brother Eric, to assassinate Rhaenyra. On the other side, Rhaenyra is shocked to learn about the child's death and that the blame has landed in her lap. She confronts Daemon, who confesses he ordered Aemon's death but swears he didn't order the boys. The trust between them cracks completely. It's an ugly fight, with accusations about the crown, Viserys' legacy, and Daemon's true intentions. In the end, he admits it was a mistake and leaves for Harrenhal, leaving Rhaenyra alone to lead. Feeling the need for intelligence, Rhaenyra frees Mysaria, who, in exchange for her liberty, warns her of imminent danger. It was Arryk, who had already managed to enter the castle. He reaches Rhaenyra's chambers, but his twin brother Eric appears to stop him. The fight is brutal and confusing. The guards don't know who to attack. In the end, Eric manages to kill Arryk, but devastated by guilt, he begs Rhaenyra for forgiveness and throws himself on his own sword. It is tragedy upon tragedy, showing that the war between the Targaryens will devour everyone, brother against brother. The episode starts with a hardcore neighbor feud between House Bracken and House Blackwood. The Brackens are accused of stealing territory, and things heat up fast. One calls the other a baby killer, killer for supporting Rhaenyra, and the response comes in kind. Aegon is king of nothing, swords are drawn, and what follows is a bloodbath with death on all sides. Meanwhile, Daemon Targaryen arrives at Harrenhal like a total boss. He lands with his dragon Caraxes in the middle of a storm, dismounts sword in hand, and takes the castle, which offers almost zero resistance. The Castellan, Sir Simon Strong, kneels immediately and swears loyalty to Rhaenyra. Daemon, suspicious of the easy victory, thinks it's poison and refuses to eat. He questions the guy's loyalty, who responds by bad-mouthing his own nephew, Larys Strong, making it clear he owes him nothing. Daemon, with an ego the size of a dragon, still corrects the man. "It's not my prince, it's your grace." At night, the terror begins. Daemon hears noises, goes to investigate, and runs into a bizarre vision, a young Rhaenyra helping her nephew, Jaehaerys. The vision even accuses him of only creating messes for her to clean up. He wakes up startled in the castle's Godswood, where a mysterious woman he'd seen before tells him he will die there. Spooky. Back at Dragonstone, the funeral for the brothers takes place. Jace is furious about having to bury the hero and the traitor side by side, but Rhaenyra keeps it classy. Rhaenys drops some truth bombs on her, saying the war has many origins, and that Alicent, deep down, doesn't want this fight. Rhaenyra, however, doesn't want to hear about talking to her ex-best friend. Later, Rhaenyra promotes Mysaria to advisor in exchange for her loyalty and intel on King's Landing. To wrap things up, Rhaenyra decides to go undercover to King's Landing to try one last conversation with Alicent. The plan is risky, and the two meet in a sept. That's where the bombshell drops. Alicent reveals that Viserys, on his deathbed, spoke about the prophecy of Aegon. Rhaenyra realizes he was referring to the Conqueror, and Alicent realizes she misinterpreted everything and started a war over a tragic misunderstanding. But now she says, it is too late. Daemon continues his stay at the haunted hotel of Harrenhal. He has a nightmare where he cuts Rhaenyra's head and wakes up to the news that his allies are flipping sides. To make matters worse, he tries to recruit House Tully, but the heir Oscar refuses to follow Daemon's suggestion to, well, hasten his grandfather's death. The prince is clearly losing his patience and his sanity, haunted by visions and the castle witch Alice Rivers, who loves to poke at his wounds. In King's Landing, Alicent is dealing with her own difficult decisions. She asks for Moon tea, an abortive, confirming her affair with Sir Criston Cole has gone too far. The scene of her knocking over a miniature dragon while grabbing the tea says it all. Things are breaking. In the council, Aemon takes total control, humiliating his brother and king, Aegon, by speaking in High Valyrian just to show who's boss. Aegon is furious but can't do anything. Alicent later gives her son a massive scolding, basically calling him useless and telling him to do nothing. Guess what he does? He grabs his dragon Sunfire and flies straight into battle to prove his mother wrong. On the other side, Rhaenyra returns to Dragonstone determined. No more trying for peace. She finally tells Jace the family's secret, the Song of Ice and Fire, the prophecy about the great war to come. She knows the fight is now for real. And then, the Battle of Rook's Rest begins. Criston Cole sets an ambush, using his army as bait. Rhaenys and her dragon Meleys fall right into the trap, but Criston's plan is ruined by the surprise arrival of King Aegon. Chaos ensues when Aemond arrives with Vhagar, the largest dragon in the world, and attacks everyone, including his own brother. Aegon and Sunfire are hit and fall from the sky. Rhaenys has a chance to flee, but decides to turn and fight. It is a brave but suicidal fight. Vhagar is simply too big and brutal. In a heartbreaking scene, he bites Meleys' neck and crushes it, killing the dragon and Princess Rhaenys instantly. Aemon wins, but at a terrible cost, leaving a trail of destruction and a broken king behind. After the battle, Criston parades Meleys' head through the streets of King's Landing, expecting applause. But the people, nearly starving to death, see it as a bad omen. Aegon survived, but is in a coma and gravely wounded. In the throne room, Alicent tries to name herself regent, but the council chooses Aemon because a man in power projects an image of strength. His first order is to lock down the city gates, trapping everyone inside. Helaena confronts her brother, asking if it was all worth it, and Alicent explodes at Criston for betraying her, but he argues that in a war of dragons, a dragon rider is needed in command. Meanwhile, Daemon continues his descent into madness at Harrenhal, having nightmares about his own mother and demanding to be called king. He orders the Blackwoods to attack the Brackens, but the brutality of the attack makes the other Riverlords view him as a tyrant. His plan is going completely wrong. Showing more sense than the adults, Jace goes on his own to negotiate with House Frey, who control the crossing at the Trident, promising them Harrenhal. He secures passage for the Northern Army to march south, a bold move that pays off. Far from the war, war, Rhaena suffers at the Eyrie, upset about not having a dragon and devastated by the news of her grandmother's death. Corlys, convinced by Baela, accepts the position of hand to Queen Rhaenyra. He wants to name Baela his heir, but she refuses, saying Driftmark needs a Velaryon in charge. Back at Dragonstone, Rhaenyra admits she doesn't understand war, but points out that her council doesn't either, since the previous kings lived in peace. Following Visaria's advice, she sends her handmaiden as a spy to King's Landing. Although irritated by Jace's disobedience, she praises him for his success with the phrase. They conclude that the only chance against the giant Vhagar is to use the other two adult dragons on Dragonstone, Vermithor, and Silverwing, who are without riders. The new mission is clear: scour the family tree for anyone with Targaryen blood to mount these two beasts. The hunt for new dragon riders has begun. The trouble starts with Lord Jason Lannister arriving at the Golden Tooth full of swagger. He brags about having a massive army, but immediately announces he won't move a muscle without Aemond and Vhagar. Basically, he ordered dragon delivery and is now just going to wait. But it seems Aemond didn't appreciate being treated like an Uber driver. In a council meeting, he snaps at Jason's brother, saying he isn't anyone's errand boy. Aemond's plan is crazy. He ignores everyone's protests and decides to hire the Triarchy, legalized pirates, to break the naval blockade. Then, he basically fires his own mother, Alicent, from the council, telling her to return to domestic duties. What an ungrateful son. While the nobility fights, King's Landing starves. Mysaria's agents spread rumors, and the people start blaming Aemond. The situation explodes when boats flying Rhaenyra's banner arrive full of food, causing a massive riot. Alicent and Helaena get caught in the middle of the chaos and are almost lynched by the mob. Over at Harrenhal, Daemon is having nightmares and freaking out, thinking everyone wants to poison him. The one who gives him a reality check is Alice Rivers. She calls him a runaway and gives him some straight talk about responsibility. Advised by her, Daemon waits, and conveniently, Lord Tully dies, opening the path for a new alliance. On Dragonstone, Rhaenyra has a desperate idea: find new dragon riders. The first volunteer, Ser Stefan, tries his luck with sea smoke and gets turned into barbecue instantly. After this fiasco, Rhaenyra vents to Mysaria, and the two end up kissing. The mood is interrupted by bombshell news. Sea Smoke has been tamed by a mysterious knight, and to top it off, we see that the new rider is Adam, a nobody who was fishing and got chosen by the dragon. Rhaenyra flies at top speed to find the dragon thief and runs right into Adam of Hull, a shipwright. The guy is humble, kneels, and swears loyalty immediately. Rhaenyra, still suspicious but needing allies, accepts him. This inspires an even crazier plan in her and Mysaria: recruit every bastard with Targaryen blood to mount the remaining dragons. As Rhaenyra puts it, "We will create an army of bastards." Jace obviously hates the idea, feeling it devalues his own legitimacy. Back at Dragonstone, the sowing of the seeds begins. Dozens of bastards, including the fearful Ulf and the determined Hugh, arrive to try their luck. The Dragon Keepers protest, calling it heresy, and abandon Rhaenyra. The first attempt to tame Vermithor is a complete disaster. The dragon gets pissed and roasts most of the candidates. However, amidst the chaos, Hugh manages to tame the giant Vermithor. Ulf, who had fled into a cavern, runs into Silverwing, who chooses him without ceremony. With two new dragons, Ulf decides to take a joyride over King's Landing to show off. Aemond, furious, mounts Vhagar and goes after him. The chase only stops when Aemond sees that waiting for him at Dragonstone is not one but 3 dragons. The math of the war has changed. To resolve the blockade, Tyland Lannister goes to negotiate with the Triarchy. Their admiral only accepts the deal after a mud wrestling match with Tyland. He wins and earns her respect and a marriage proposal. Aemond, blinded by hatred for the new dragon riders, takes his anger out on the port town of Sharp Point, burning everything and everyone. He tries to force Helaena to fight, but she refuses, saying she has already seen his death in a vision. Aegon, terrified of his brother, flees King's Landing with the help of Larys, who has a plan: let Rhaenyra and Aemond destroy each other. At Harrenhal, Daemon is tempted to proclaim himself king, but Alice Rivers takes him to a weirwood tree where he has visions of the future, including White Walkers and Daenerys. He finally understands his role in the grand scheme of things. When Rhaenyra arrives, he kneels, reaffirming his loyalty. The Riverlord's army is now hers. The tension between Corlys and his bastard sons continues. Alan rejects him, saying Corlys only cares now that his legitimate children are dead. That hurt. The most tense moment is Alicent's secret visit to Dragonstone. Desperate, she offers Rhaenyra a peaceful surrender of King's Landing understanding in exchange for her family's lives. Rhaenyra is blunt. For the war to end and the throne to be hers, Aegon must die. Alicent, devastated, seems to accept the price. The episode ends with an epic montage of armies marching from every corner of Westeros. Hightowers, Starks, Lannisters. Daemon prepares for war. Peace is over. Total war has begun. And we finally arrive at the series in Game of Thrones, and things start off tense on the ice, with 3 rangers investigating some butchered bodies in a very macabre, ritualistic style. But the worst part isn't the corpses, it's when they disappear. A being with glowing blue eyes, aka a White Walker, think of an ice zombie on steroids, shows up and makes mincemeat of the group. Only one is left to tell the tale, completely traumatized. Cut to Winterfell, where the Starks run the show. Ned Stark, the honorable dad, teaches his sons that the man who passes the sentence should swing the sword, and executes the desperate guy who fled the wall. On the way back, they find a dead direwolf, and fate stepping in, 5 pups survive, 1 for each legitimate child. And of course, Jon Snow, the bastard with the outcast vibe, finds an albino pup for himself. It's practically the perfect RPG setup.
Run to the litter. That one's yours, Snow.
Meanwhile, across the Narrow Sea, Viserys Targaryen, a strong candidate for Worst Brother of the Year, sells his younger sister Daenerys to Khal Drogo, a warrior leader who looks like Conan the Barbarian but speaks way less. All this in exchange for an army. At the wedding, there are some casual deaths, because a Dothraki wedding without at least 3 deaths is considered a dull affair. And Dany gets 3 fossilized dragon eggs. King Robert arrives in Winterfell with all the pomp and the Lannister family in tow. He asks Ned to be the hand of the king, but shit really hits the fan at the end. Little Bronn, who loves climbing walls, climbs where he shouldn't and catches Queen Cersei in an infamous moment with her twin brother Jaime. And like any proper villain, Jaime drops the line, "The things I do for love," and pushes the kid from the tower. Across the sea, Daenerys' married life isn't easy, but she decides to turn the tables. With some tips from her handmaiden, she learns to dominate her barbarian husband in his own language and in bed, starting to show she's not just a bargaining chip. In Winterfell, the mood is heavy. Tyrion Lannister, who is the most sensible character in this story, slaps his nephew Joffrey around so he stops being a brat and pays his respects to the Starks. Pure satisfaction to watch.
I can't stand the wailing of women.
One word, and I hit you again.
I'm telling Mother.
Before leaving for the Wall, Jon Snow gives a cute gift to his little sister Arya, a thin sword she names Needle. Ned heads south with his daughters, leaving his wife Catelyn taking care of Bronn, who is in a coma. But the calm ends quickly. An assassin tries to finish the job in Bronn's room, and his mother turns into a lioness to defend her son. But the one who really saves the day is the direwolf, who rips the intruder's throat out. Catelyn, playing detective, finds a strand of blonde hair in the tower and suspects the Lannisters. On the road south, Prince Joffrey shows his true face as a pint-sized psychopath. He picks on Arya and her friend, but ends up getting bitten by the wolf Nymeria and taking a blow to his ego. The problem: Queen Cersei is vengeful, and since Arya's wolf ran away, the one who pays the price is Lady, Sansa's innocent wolf. Ned, with a heavy heart, is forced to sacrifice the animal, proving that nothing in this world is fair. Ned arrives in the capital and immediately realizes he's in hot water. The realm is broke, owing its soul to the Lannisters. He meets the Small Council, a group of distinct figures like Littlefinger and the eunuch Varys, who know everything that happens. Catelyn arrives secretly in the city, and Littlefinger drops a bombshell. The dagger used to try and kill Bronn was his, but he lost it in a bet to Tyrion. The betrayal plot is set. Meanwhile, to try and calm things down between the Stark sisters, Ned hires a dancing teacher for Arya. But it's not ballet. It's the master swordsman Syrio Forel, and the girl starts training seriously because she's not here to play around. Up at the Wall, Jon Snow thinks he's God's gift to the world during training, humiliating the recruits. Tyrion has to give him a reality check, explaining that not everyone had a castle and a master at arms. The two develop a mutual respect before the dwarf heads back south. But the top-tier turnaround happens with Daenerys. Tired of being bossed around by her brother Viserys, she orders the caravan to stop. The guy flips out, gets a noose around his neck, and discovers his his sister isn't the same anymore. To close with a flourish, she finds out she's pregnant by Drogo and is certain a warrior boy is on the way. The power has changed hands. In Winterfell, Tyrion shows he has a heart, or at least sympathy for broken things, and designs a special saddle for Bronn to ride a horse again, since his legs don't work anymore. After delivering a classic job at Theon Greyjoy, the dwarf heads south. At the wall, reinforcements arrive that nobody asked for. Samwell Tarly. The guy is fearful, chubby, and declares himself a coward. In training, he gets beaten up more than an action movie villain, until Jon Snow intervenes and saves his hide. Jon realizes not everyone was born to be Rambo. Across the sea, Viserys continues to be the most insufferable brother in history. He tries to steal the dragon eggs and even assaults Daenerys, but the Khaleesi is tired of being a punching bag. She hits back, strikes her brother with a heavy belt, and warns him that next time he'll lose a hand.
The next time you raise a hand to me will be the last time you have hands.
In King's Landing, Ned Stark plays private investigator. Investigating the death of Jon Arryn, he visits a blacksmith and finds Gendry, a bastard of King Robert, who is the spitting image of his father. The whole mystery seems to revolve around a book of lineages and the phrase, "The seed is strong." The heat really turns up at an inn on the road. Catelyn Stark runs right into Tyrion. Instead of pretending she didn't see him, she calls upon all the knights in the place, pins the blame for Bronn's accident on the dwarf, and orders them to arrest the guy right there. Catelyn drags poor Tyrion through the mountains, and after almost dying in an attack by hill tribes, where the dwarf actually kills a guy with a shield, they arrive at the Eyrie. There we meet Catelyn's sister, Lysa Arryn, who clearly kicked the bucket of sanity a long time ago. She throws Tyrion into a sky cell, which is basically a hole in the wall facing the abyss, pure nightmare fuel. In King's Landing, a jousting tournament takes place. The Mountain, that psychopathic giant, fights against Sir Loras, the Knight of Flowers. Loras wins with a cheap trick using a mare in heat to distract the giant's horse. The Mountain goes ballistic, decapitates his own horse, and tries to kill Loras, but is stopped by his brother, the Hound.
Leave him be.
In the council, King Robert decides he wants to the pregnant Daenerys. Ned Stark, the only one with a moral compass in this place, thinks this is cowardly and resigns as Hand of the King. He was already packing his bags when Littlefinger takes him to a brothel to see yet another of Robert's bastard daughters. On the way out, shit goes down. Jaime Lannister and his men surround Ned, furious over Tyrion's arrest. The dispute turns into a bloody street fight. Jaime kills Jury, Ned's right-hand man, with a dagger to the squares up 1v1 against the Stark. The fight is good, but a Lannister soldier ruins it by sticking a spear through Ned's leg. Jaime walks away, leaving the message delivered. Ned wakes up all broken and runs into King Robert and Cersei arguing. The king gives the badge back to Ned and goes out hunting, leaving the Stark in charge. And Ned doesn't waste time. Sitting on the Iron Throne, he receives reports that the Mountain is destroying villages. Ignoring any political caution, he strips the giant of his titles and sends a squad to execute him. Pure boldness. Meanwhile, Sansa remains delusional, wanting to marry Prince Joffrey, but accidentally drops the missing piece of her father's puzzle, the blonde hair. Ned runs to the Book of Lineages and realizes that every Baratheon in history had black hair except for Robert's children with Cersei. The penny finally drops. At the Eyrie, Tyrion demands a trial by combat. Since he's no fool, the mercenary Bronn volunteers to fight for him. Bronn fights dirty, tires out Lysa's knight, and shoves the poor guy through the moon door into a free fall without a parachute. Tyrion walks out free and skipping. The episode closes with the most metal moment of the series. Viserys, drunk and unhinged, crashes the Dothraki feast and threatens to hurt Daenerys if he doesn't receive his crown. Khal Drogo promises him the crown he wants so badly. The cow melts a gold belt in a pot and pours the boiling metal over Viserys' head.
A crown for a king.
As her brother dies screaming, Daenerys watches coldly and drops the catchphrase, "He was no dragon. Fire cannot kill a dragon." Tywin Lannister sends Jaime off to war because obviously preserving the family's honor matters more than anything else. Meanwhile, in the north, Jon Snow is convinced he's going to become a badass ranger, but ends up becoming the personal steward to the Lord Commander. Sam tries to cheer him up, saying it's leadership training, but Jon has that look of someone who got socks for Christmas. On the other side of the world, Jorah saves Daenerys from wine veins spiked with poison. Khal Drogo gets so pissed off at the assassination attempt on his wife that he finally decides he's going to cross the sea and take the Iron Throne, promising the chaos and destruction we love to see. In King's Landing, the circus is on fire. Ned Stark confronts Cersei and puts it on the table that he knows her children are the product of with Jaime. Cersei, cold as ice, drops the most iconic line of the series: "When you play the Game of Thrones, you win or you die." And Ned, with his unwavering honor and lack of malice, doesn't see the danger. King Robert returns from the hunt destroyed by a boar and names Ned Protector of the Realm before kicking the bucket. But when Ned tries to take command of the throne, Littlefinger, living up to his reputation as the biggest backstabber in Westeros, puts a knife to his throat. The City Watch massacres the Northmen, and Ned finds out the hard way that you can't trust anyone in this city. Things start getting a bit The Walking Dead at the wall. Bodies brought from the forest rise as blue-eyed zombies and attack the Lord Commander. Jon Snow saves the day using fire and discovers that, unlike in regular horror movies, swords don't solve everything here. Meanwhile, Robb Stark calls the banners and marches to war. One of the lords tries to step up to him, but Robb's direwolf settles the argument by biting off 2 of the guy's fingers. Moral of the story: don't mess with the boss's dog. In Essos, Khal Drogo gets hurt in a fight and, in a questionable decision, lets a witch he just enslaved treat the wound. In King's Landing, the situation for the Starks goes from bad to worse. The Lannisters start cleaning house. Syrio Forel, Arya's dancing master, faces armored guards using only a wooden sword, in a scene worthy of a Jedi master sacrificing himself so the hero can escape. Arya manages to get away, but not before having to kill a stable boy, losing her innocence in the process. Sansa, poor thing, is manipulated into writing letters asking for peace, and Joffrey, now king, promises mercy if Ned confesses to treason. Sounds easy, but coming from Joffrey, we already know mercy is a word he doesn't understand. Robb Stark needs to cross a river, but the bridge is controlled by Walder Frey, a grumpy and creepy old man. Catelyn negotiates the crossing, but the price is steep. Robb will have to marry one of Frey's daughters in the future. He accepts, basically signing a contract without reading the fine print. In the battle against the Lannisters, Tyrion goes to the vanguard with the Hill tribes. But in a hilarious and anticlimactic moment, he gets knocked out and passes out before the fight even starts, missing all the action. When he wakes up, he discovers it was all a distraction. Robb's real army went somewhere else and captured none other than Jaime Lannister. The Kingslayer is now a prisoner, and Robb shows he's a born strategist. At the wall, Jon gets a beautiful Valyrian steel sword, Longclaw, and Master Aemon reveals he is a Targaryen, uncle to the Mad King, blowing everyone's mind with this complicated family tree. In Essos, Drogo is on the brink of death. Daenerys, desperate, authorizes the witch to use blood magic to save him, which involves sacrificing the horse and going into labor in the middle of a demonic ritual. But the final blow comes in King's Landing. Ned Stark, swallowing his pride to save his daughters, falsely confesses to treason in front of the crowd. Joffrey, in a fit of psychopathy, ignores the deal made with Sansa and orders Ned's head to be right there. The blade comes down and the hero of the season dies, proving that Sean Bean really doesn't survive anything and that in this series, no one is safe. Things are ugly in King's Landing. After that terrible decision to chop off Ned Stark's head, seriously, nobody expected the protagonist to bite the dust so soon. Joffrey forces Sansa to look at her father's head on a spike. The kid is sadistic on an absurd level and even orders his guards to beat her. Sansa, in a moment of silent fury, almost pushes the little king off the bridge, but the Hound, Sandor Clegane, prevents the tragedy, or deserved vengeance, and wipes the blood off her. Meanwhile, Arya is rescued by Yoren, who cuts her hair and disguises her as a boy to escape from there towards the wall, along with a rough crowd. In the north, sadness turns to revolt. While Catelyn cries her eyes out in the woods, she finds Robb taking his anger out on a tree. But the mourning is short-lived. The northern vassals decide they want nothing to do with Stannis or Renly Baratheon. Great John Umber gives a fiery speech and, in a chilling moment, everyone kneels declaring Robb the king in the north. The war is now official and separate from the dramas of the south. Across the sea, Daenerys' life has become a nightmare. Her baby was born dead and monstrous, and Khal Drogo is in a vegetative vegetative state thanks to the magic of that witch she saved. Realizing her husband is gone, Dany smothers him with a pillow, a sad end for a fierce warrior. But it's at the funeral where the magic happens. She burns the witch alive, places the dragon eggs on the pyre, and walks into the fire. When day breaks, Dany is intact, naked, and with 3 newborn dragons. It is the birth of a legend and the return of magic to the world. The Night's Watch arrives at Craster's Keep, a creepy old man who marries his own daughters. The place has a horror movie vibe, and Jon Snow, always with that keen sense of justice, almost picks a fight with the host, but the Lord Commander tells him to cool it. According to him, they need Craster, as disgusting as he is. In King's Landing, Tyrion arrives bringing order to the house as the new hand of the king, leaving Cersei furious.
Your father has named Lord Tyrion to serve as hand in his stead while he fights.
Out! All of you out!
He realizes Joffrey is uncontrollable and that his sister lost her grip on raising the kid. And speaking of Cersei, she has a tense philosophical clash with Littlefinger. He tries to drop the cliche line that knowledge is power, but she orders the guards to seize him and almost cut his throat, just to prove that actually power is power. Over at Dragonstone, we are introduced to Stannis Baratheon, a guy with the personality of a door, but who is being manipulated by Melisandre, a mysterious red priestess. She burns statues of the old gods and survives a cup of poisoned wine as if it were grape juice, killing the master who tried to take her down. Stannis sends letters to the whole realm revealing that Cersei's children are products of which throws more fuel on the fire of war. Arya and Gendry are on the road, and the mood is tense. Gendry, who's no fool, figures out that Arya is a girl, and she ends up revealing she's a Stark. The City Watch arrives looking for Gendry, but Yoren, the tough-as-nails recruiter, tells the guys to get lost. In King's Landing, Tyrion continues his political cleanup. He discovers who betrayed his father, fires Genos with style, and ships the guy off to the wall, putting the mercenary Bronn in command of the City Watch. The dwarf is playing the Game of Thrones on hard mode and even roasts Cersei about the Theon Greyjoy returns home to the Iron Islands thinking he'll be received with a red carpet, but reality is cruel. He tries to hit on a girl on the way, only to find out later she is Yara, his sister. The reverse Luke and Leia moment is awkward. To make matters worse, his father, Balon Greyjoy, treats his son like trash, rejects the alliance with Robb, and says he's going to take what he wants by force, paying the iron price. Theon is left looking foolish, torn between the loyalty to the Starks and his toxic biological family. Beyond the wall, Jon Snow decides to play detective and follows Craster into the woods. He sees the old man hand over a newborn baby to the White Walkers, but before Jon can do anything heroic, Craster knocks him over the head and the screen goes black. Meanwhile, Daenerys, in the desert, receives a macabre gift, the head of one of her companions in a bag. Her situation is getting increasingly critical. Jon Snow finds out the hard way that being curious beyond the wall costs dearly. After taking a beating from Craster for spying on what the old man does with his sons, Jon is dragged back. Lord Commander Mormont gives him a scolding, but admits he already knew about the sacrifices to the White Walkers all along. Basically, they have to accept that Craster is a necessary evil for the Watch to survive in the ice. Extremely heavy atmosphere. Meanwhile, Bronn keeps having bizarre dreams where he sees the world through the wolf's eyes, but Master Luwin thinks it's all nonsense. Poor guy. Little does he know. Further south, Catelyn Stark arrives at Renly Baratheon's camp and realizes the guy is taking the war kind of lightly, organizing tournaments while all hell breaks loose elsewhere. Renly introduces his new wife, Margaery Tyrell, but the dynamic there is complex. Renly prefers her brother, Loras. Margaery, pragmatic to the bone, even suggests an anything-goes arrangement just to ensure an heir. In the Iron Islands, Theon Greyjoy tries to play strategist, but his father, Balon, wants nothing to do with an alliance with the Starks. The old man wants to attack the north while it's unprotected. Theon gets pissed, torn between the family that raised him and his blood, but in the end, decides to betray Robb and is baptized in the faith of the drowned god. A historic screw-up. In King's Landing, Tyrion gives a masterclass on how to catch a snitch. He tells 3 different versions of a marriage plan to 3 council members. When Cersei comes to complain about the version he told Grandmaster Pycelle, Tyrion discovers who the blabbermouth is and has the old man arrested on the spot. Masterstroke. To close the horror show, Arya's group is attacked by the Lannisters. Yoren fights like an animal but doesn't make it. In the chaos, Arya saves a mysterious prisoner named Jaqen from b***ing to death.
Quick, give it to me.
The sadistic Polliver kills Lami and steals Arya's needle. Sharp as ever, she convinces the soldiers that Lami's body is Gendry's, saving her bastard friend's skin. Now, everyone is taken prisoner to Harrenhal. Robb Stark continues killing it on the battlefield and destroys a Lannister camp in the dead of night. While walking among the wounded, he meets Talisa, a nurse from Volantis who isn't afraid to criticize the war to the king in the North's face. There's instant forbidden romance chemistry, with Robb ignoring advice to be cruel to the prisoners. Arya, meanwhile, ended up in the worst place in the world, Harrenhal. The castle looks like the set of Saul, with the Mountain and his men torturing people indiscriminately. There's even a bizarre scheme with a rat and a bucket that will give you nightmares. Just as Gendry is about to get it, Tywin Lannister arrives imposing authority, orders the senseless torture to stop, and unknowingly hires Arya as his cupbearer. The most dangerous man in Westeros and the Stark girl sharing the same room. Pure tension. In King's Landing, Joffrey reaches new levels of psychopathy. He orders his guards to beat Sansa in front of the entire court just to provoke her brother. Tyrion intervenes, saves the girl, and tries to calm things down by sending 2 escorts to gift the king. Terrible idea. Joffrey forces one to beat the other with a club. The kid is beyond repair. At least Tyrion uncovers some giant dirt. His cousin Lancel is sleeping with Cersei. The dwarf uses this to blackmail the boy and gain a free spy. Far away, Littlefinger tries to negotiate with Catelyn by bringing Ned Stark's bones, but she doesn't fall for his smooth talk. Meanwhile, Stannis and Renly have a not-so-friendly brothers meeting, measuring who has the bigger army, but the really weird stuff happens later. Davos takes Melisandre to a cave, and instead of a normal birth, the woman gives birth to a shadow assassin. Yeah, magic is back with a vengeance. Across the world, Daenerys arrives in Qarth but is barred at the gate. The city leaders want to see the dragons first. Dany gets furious and threatens to burn everything, but Xaro, a local tycoon, makes a blood oath and guarantees entry for her and the starving Dothraki. The episode starts with a shock. The macabre shadow Melisandre birthed enters Renly's tent, and in front of Catelyn and Brienne, kills the king. The blame falls on Brienne, who is forced to flee and swear loyalty to Catelyn. With Renly out of the picture, Stannis absorbs his brother's army, proving that black magic is more efficient than diplomacy. In King's Landing, Tyrion discovers that Cersei is stockpiling wildfire, a green substance that is basically medieval napalm.
The substance burns so hot it melts wood, stone, even steel. And, of course, flesh.
He takes control of the operation because he knows that in the hands of stupid people, that stuff will blow up the whole city. Meanwhile, Theon Greyjoy completes his transformation into a villain. He comes up with a plan to lure the Winterfell soldiers away and leave the castle defenseless. The guy is willing to do anything to impress Daddy. In Harrenhal, Arya is living dangerously, serving wine to Tywin, and is almost discovered. But the highlight is the reunion with Jaqen, now dressed as a Lannister soldier. He says he owes her 3 deaths for being saved from the fire. Arya, wasting no time, points out the fortress torturer. Shortly after, the guy turns up with a broken It's like having a human death note at her disposal. Up in the frozen north, the Night's Watch prepares to face the wildlings, and Jon Snow volunteers for a scouting mission. Meanwhile in Qarth, Dany's dragons are growing and roasting their own meat. Xaro proposes marriage in exchange for ships and an army for her to conquer Westeros. Jorah Mormont, clearly in the friend zone and dying of jealousy, advises against it, saying she should win the throne on her own, not be bought by a merchant. Dany listens to the advice, but the vibe between the two gets, to say the least, awkward. In Winterfell, the situation is chaotic. Theon Greyjoy, who betrayed the family that raised him, invades the defenseless castle with his pirates. He forces Bronn to surrender the fortress to save the people, and to prove he's become a full-blown villain, Theon tries to execute old Sir Roderick. The scene is cringe-inducing. He needs several poorly aimed hacks to manage to guy's head off, leaving everyone horrified. But the night has a twist. Osha, the wildling, uses her charms to distract Theon, sleeps with him, and then flees, taking Bronn, Rickon, and the direwolves. Meanwhile, at the northern camp, Robb Stark is in that romance vibe with the nurse Talisa, until his mother arrives to kill the mood. Rose Bolton receives news of Theon's betrayal, and suggests sending his bastard son Ramsay to solve the issue. Robb agrees, but wants Theon alive to look him in the eye before killing him. Back in Harrenhal, Arya is living dangerously, serving Tywin Lannister. Littlefinger shows up to visit, and she is almost discovered. Later, Arya steals a confidential letter but is caught by the sadistic Amalri Lorch. She runs to her assassin Genie, Jaqen, and uses her second wish to kill Lorch before he tells Tywin everything. The guy drops dead at the boss's door. In the capital, King's Landing is a powder keg. The people are starving, and when King Joffrey passes by, someone throws cow dung in his face. Joffrey, being the most sensible person in the world, orders everyone killed. A full-scale riot begins. Sansa almost becomes a statistic at the hands of but the Hound, Sandor Clegane, appears in berserker mode and saves the girl. Tyrion gets so disgusted with his nephew's stupidity that he slaps the king across the face. The most satisfying moment of the series so far.
They're starving, you fool! All because of a war you started!
You're talking to a king!
And now I've struck a king!
To wrap up, Jon Snow captures a wildling named Ygritte, but doesn't have the heart to execute her. She escapes, he chases after her, and the two end up isolated from the group in the snow. Oh, and in Qarth, Daenerys discovers her dragons have been stolen in a mysterious heist. The episode starts heavy in Winterfell. Theon discovers the Stark boys have escaped and goes out to hunt them with dogs. He goes to a farm, finds no one, but returns to the castle with two burned and unrecognizable bodies, hanging the corpses at the gate. Master Luwin weeps, thinking they are Bronn and Rickon. Theon has crossed the line of no return. In King's Landing, Sansa wakes up and realizes she bled in the bed. She has become a woman, which means she can now officially marry and have children with the monster Joffrey. She tries to hide it, but gets caught. Cersei gives that twisted motivational speech saying that love is a weakness and she should only love her children because the rest of the world is trash. Speaking of dysfunctional families, Jaime Lannister, a prisoner in Robb's camp, kills his own cousin just to create a distraction and try to escape. He is recaptured immediately. Catelyn Stark goes to confront him, and Jaime, cynical as ever, mocks Ned Stark's honor and the fact that he has a bastard. Catelyn gets pissed and asks to borrow Brienne's sword. Up in the frozen north, the dynamic between Jon Snow and Ygritte is looking like a teen rom-com. She spends the whole time teasing him about being a virgin and knowing nothing about life. Jon gets flustered. She takes advantage of the distraction, runs off, and leads him straight into an ambush full of wildlings. On the other side of the world, in Qarth, Daenerys is desperate looking for her dragons. She goes to ask the Council of 13 for help, but the bizarre warlock Pyat Pri confesses to the theft.
I will help you, Khaleesi.
How?
I will take you to the House of the Undying, where I have put them.
In a magical plot twist, he and Xaro stage a coup, kill the other leaders, and invite Dany to come get her children at the House of the Undying. Jon Snow is now a prisoner of the wildlings. Their leader wants to kill the Crow, but Ygritte convinces the guy to spare Jon because he has Stark blood. Qhorin, who was also captured, hatches a plan for Jon to infiltrate the enemy ranks. Meanwhile, his friends Sam and Grenn find some legendary loot buried in the snow, dragon glass weapons. In Winterfell, Theon's sister Yara shows up. He thinks he's getting reinforcements, but she only brings a lecture, calling him stupid for taking a castle so far from the sea and telling him to come home. Theon, too proud, decides to stay. The twist, the Stark boys aren't dead. Osha hid them in the catacombs of the castle itself, right under Theon's nose. In King's Landing, Stannis is approaching with his naval fleet. Tyrion is focused on defending the city using wildfire, basically green napalm. Cersei, thinking she's clever, kidnaps the she believes is Tyrion's girlfriend to blackmail her brother, except she grabs Ros instead of Shae. Tyrion keeps his poker face and pretends he fell for the bluff, but swears revenge. At Harrenhal, Tywin heads off to war and leaves Arya serving the Mountain. Realizing things are about to get ugly, Arya looks for Jaqen. He says he can't help her escape, so she uses a cheat code. She gives him his own name, Jaqen, as the third person he must kill. The glitch in the system works. Forced to negotiate for his own life, Jaqen kills the guards and helps Arya. Gendry and Hot Pie escape right out the front door. In the Stark camp, the mood has soured. Robb discovers that his mother released Jaime Lannister and sent Brienne to take him to trade for her daughters. Robb arrests his own mother for treason, and to top off the rebellion, he ignores his arranged marriage with the Freys and goes to bed with Talisa. Things just got serious in King's Landing, and the vibe is apocalyptic. Tyrion is trying to organize the mess left by Joffrey, while Stannis Baratheon's army arrives out for blood with a massive fleet. The tension is so high that Tyrion tries to send Shae away to save her, but she decides to stay. When the battle starts, Joffrey proves he's a cardboard leader and just complains on the ramparts. But Tyrion, our favorite strategist, has prepared a Michael Bay-style trap. He doesn't send ships to counterattack. He sends a single boat filled with wildfire. When Bronn hits the flaming arrow, boom! The sea turns into a neon green hell. The explosion is so insane it vaporizes a good chunk of Stannis' fleet and Davos Seaworth's son. Check out Stannis' stubbornness. Even with his army on fire, he orders his men to land and attack on foot. The Hound, Sandor Clegane, goes out to fight, but when he sees the fire, the trauma hits hard. He freezes, tells the king and the Kingsguard to go to hell, and simply quits the game. Meanwhile, Cersei is locked up with the court ladies, drinking heavily and terrorizing Sansa with horror stories. She is so desperate she sits on the Iron Throne with her youngest son Tommen, ready to give the kid and kill herself before the enemy gets in. Tyrion has to lead the attack personally because Joffrey fled to his mother's skirts. He gives an epic speech, fights bravely, but is betrayed and takes a brutal slash to the face from a member of his own Kingsguard. Just when all seems lost and Cersei already has the poison vial to her lips, Tywin Lannister arrives with the Tyrell cavalry and saves the day. Stannis is dragged out of the battle screaming, defeated. Tyrion wakes up all bandaged, thinking he's going to get a Medal of Honor, but reality is a punch in the face. His father, Tywin, has taken over as Hand of the King, stole all the credit for the victory, and threw the dwarf into a shabby little room with zero power. To top it off, Bronn lost his command and the mountain of money. The poor guy went from hero to zero in 2 seconds. In the throne room, Joffrey is handing out prizes. Littlefinger gets a giant castle, and the Tyrell family calls in their favor. Joffrey agrees to annul his engagement to Sansa to marry Margaery Tyrell. Sansa almost sets off fireworks thinking she's free, but Littlefinger, always the bearer of bad news, warns her that Joffrey will continue to torment her life if she stays there. Meanwhile, Robb Stark is making the classic teenage in love mistake. He ignores his mother's advice and marries Talisa in secret, breaking the promise made to Walder Frey. As for Daenerys, she goes to the House of the Undying to rescue her dragons. She has some trippy visions of the Iron Throne and the late Khal Drogo, but doesn't fall for the illusion. When the warlock Pyat Pri tries to trap her, Dany drops that sweet Dracarys. The dragons turn the guy into barbecue, and for the traitor Zaro, she locks him and the traitor inside the empty vault to starve. The legend loots everything and moves on to the next one. Up in the frozen north, Jon Snow is playing 4D chess. He kills Qhorin in a staged fight to prove loyalty to the wildlings. The plan works, and he is taken to meet the so-called King Beyond the Wall. The episode closes with Sam seeing the biggest nightmare possible, a gigantic army of White Walkers and zombies marching in the snow. After narrowly escaping the army of the undead, Sam and the Night's Watch survivors decide to head back to the Wall to warn everyone that the zombie apocalypse has officially started. Meanwhile, Jon Snow arrives at the wildling camp and gets severe culture shock. He sees real giants and discovers that nobody there kneels. He meets Mance and convinces the guy that he switched sides because he wants to fight for the living against the dead. In King's Landing, things are heating up in the Lannister family. Tyrion demands recognition from his father, but Tywin delivers the cruelest speech in history, calling his son an ill-made creature and saying he only didn't kill him because he is a Lannister. Heavy stuff. Meanwhile, Margaery Tyrell is giving a masterclass in public relations, visiting orphanages, giving food to the poor, and winning over the people, leaving Cersei eaten up with envy since she only knows how to rule by fear. Davos, poor guy, is rescued from a deserted island, but as soon as he arrives at Dragonstone, he tries to kill Melisandre for his son's death. Result? Stannis throws his loyal friend in the dungeon. Gratitude sends its regards. But the highlight goes to Daenerys. She arrives in Astapor wanting to buy the Unsullied, an army of slave soldiers trained to feel no pain. The seller is a disgusting jerk who keeps insulting her in the local tongue, thinking she understands nothing. Little does he know. In the middle of the tour, a little girl tries to hand Dany a gift, but it's a trap with a bizarre scorpion. Out of nowhere, a hooded old man appears, saves Dany, and kills the creature. The savior reveals himself to be none other than Barristan, the greatest knight in Westeros, who kneels and swears to protect the rightful queen. Dany's team is getting stacked. Jon Snow is traveling with the wildlings and discovers that Mance's army is like a Tower of Babel, full of clans that hate each other but are together so they don't turn into popsicles for the White Walkers. They introduce Jon to a guy named Orell, who is a warg. Basically, the guy can enter the minds of animals and use an eagle as a recon drone. Meanwhile, Bronn Stark is having weird dreams about a three-eyed raven and out of nowhere meets Jojen and Mira Reed. Jojen is like that tutorial NPC who explains that Bronn is also a warg and and has magical powers. In King's Landing, the political beef continues. Olenna Tyrell, Marjorie's grandmother and the sharpest old lady in the series, invites Sansa for a snack. She pressures the girl until Sansa admits that Joffrey is a sadistic monster. Olenna doesn't even blink, just confirms that her granddaughter will marry the monster anyway because power is power. Robb Stark gets terrible news. His grandfather has died and Winterfell has been burned, supposedly killing his brothers. Catelyn is in a bad place and tells a tense story about how she wished for Jon Snow's death when he was a baby. Heavy, Arya, Gendry, and Hot Pie running to the Brotherhood Without Banners, a Robin Hood-style crew. They seem cool until the Hound, who is captured by them, looks at Arya and screams to everyone that she is a Stark. As for Jaime Lannister and Brienne, they trade barbs and then swords on a bridge. Jaime is rusty and takes a beating from Brienne, but the fight ends when some soldiers from House Bolton arrive and capture them both. Daenerys is in Astapor negotiating the purchase of the Unsullied, the most disciplined soldiers in the world. The seller is a jerk who keeps insulting her in the local language, thinking she doesn't understand anything. Dany decides to flip the script and offers one of her dragons in exchange for all 8,000 soldiers. Jorah and Barristan go crazy over this harebrained idea, but she closes the deal. In the north, Robb's grandfather's funeral turns into a slapstick comedy when Edmure Tully tries to hit the dead man's boat with a flaming arrow and misses 3 times. The Blackfish, the badass uncle, takes the bow from his hands and hits it on the first try, Legolas style, without even looking at the result. Afterward, Robb chews Edmure out for ruining the war strategy against the Lannisters. In King's Landing, Tywin Lannister holds a meeting where the highlight is a game of musical chairs. Cersei, Littlefinger, and Varys fight over who sits closest to the boss. Tyrion becomes the new master of coin and gives his squire Podrick a gift, an afternoon with 3 girls. The plot twist? The kid comes back with the money because the girls didn't want to charge him. What he did in there became the biggest mystery in Westeros. Over in the Riverlands, things get ugly for Jaime and Brienne. The kidnappers want to Brienne, but Jaime uses his smooth talk and invents a story that her family is rich in sapphires to save the warrior's skin. It works. Jaime then tries to bribe the leader, Locke, with talk of money. Locke pretends to accept, but in a moment of pure brutality, the Kingslayer is now one-handed.
Yeah, this should help you remember.
The vibe is terrible for Jaime. The guy is being humiliated. He wants to give up on life, but Brienne gives him a reality check, telling him to man up and take the hit. In King's Landing, Varys shows Tyrion why he's in no rush for revenge. He opens a crate, and inside is the sorcerer who him years ago. Patience is everything. Meanwhile, Marjorie continues manipulating Joffrey masterfully, feigning interest in his sadistic stories, and even drops the idea of marrying Sansa to Loras Tyrell. Sansa gets her hopes up, thinking she's going to escape hell. Theon Greyjoy, who thought he was being rescued by the cleaning boy, discovers he fell for the cruelest prank in history. The boy takes him back to the dungeon and reveals it was all psychological torture. Beyond the wall, chaos reigns at Craster's Keep. The Night's Watchmen, starving and pissed off, start a mutiny. The result is a bloodbath. Craster dies, and Lord Commander Mormont is betrayed and killed by his own men. Sam takes advantage of the confusion to escape with Gilly and the baby, but the big moment belongs to Daenerys. Time to trade the dragon for the soldiers, she reveals she speaks Valyrian fluently and understood every single one of the seller's insults. She drops the classic Dracarys. The dragon roasts the slaver, and she orders the Unsullied to kill all the masters. She frees the soldiers, who decide to follow her of their own free will. Jon Snow continues his mission infiltrated among the wildlings, but there's heavy tension with Orell, the warg who controls the Eagle. The guy is suspicious of everything Jon says about the Night's Watch. To ease the tension, or create more, Ygritte steals his sword and lures him into a cave with thermal waters. The place is beautiful, warm, and Ygritte decides it's the perfect time to test if Jon really knows nothing. They break Jon's vow of chastity with style, and Ygritte even suggests they stay there forever. Classic tragic romance in the making. Meanwhile, at Riverrun, things go south for Robb Stark. Lord Karstark, furious about not getting revenge on Jaime, decides to kill 2 hostage Lannister boys. Robb, following his father's stubborn honor playbook, decides to execute Karstark for treason, ignoring everyone who said it was a bad idea. Result, the Karstark soldiers leave, and Robb loses half his army with a snap of his fingers. Now he needs to crawl back to Lord Frey if he wants a chance in the war. But the gold of the episode is at Harrenhal. Jaime Lannister and Brienne are in a communal bath. Jaime, delirious with fever, finally drops the bombshell. He didn't kill the Mad King on a whim. The king wanted to burn King's Landing to the ground with wildfire, killing innocents, and Jaime stopped the Brienne and us is stunned by the revelation. Oh, and there's magic happening. The Hound fights Beric in a trial by combat. Beric lights his sword with his own blood, but the Hound wins. Except, just when everything seems over, Thoros of Myr prays, and Beric resurrects.
But not today.
Literally comes back to life. Arya is shocked, and so are we. In King's Landing, Tywin decides to play The Sims with his children. He wants to marry Cersei to Loras and Tyrion to Sansa. Nobody liked the idea. The political game in King's Landing is insane. Tywin Lannister calls Olenna Tyrell for a dialectical 1v1. The Queen of Thorns tries to refuse the marriage between Cersei and Loras, throwing Cersei's age and the incest handle in his face. But Tywin, being the old fox he is, threatens to put Loras in the Kingsguard, which would end the Tyrell lineage. Olenna, cornered, accepts. Meanwhile, Sansa believes she's going to marry the Knight of Flowers and escape to Highgarden. But Tyrion has the thankless task of telling her that, actually, she's going to marry him. Total funeral vibes. Up in the north, things get macabre for Theon. The boy torturing him starts a sadistic psychological game. If Theon guesses who he is and where they are, he only loses a pinky finger. Theon guesses, gets it wrong, or the boy lies. And the torture continues unchecked. Meanwhile, in the Riverlands, Arya is practicing archery when Melisandre appears out of nowhere with the Brotherhood. The Red Priestess sees something in Arya's eyes, drops a sinister prophecy, and then simply buys Gendry because she needs his king's blood. Arya is furious at the Brotherhood's betrayal, but the adrenaline really explodes at the wall. The group of wildlings with Jon and Ygritte starts climbing that absurd wall of ice. It's cliffhanger level tension. A chunk of ice breaks, sending a bunch of people into the void. Jon and Ygritte are left dangling by a rope, and the jealous Orell tries to cut the line to kill them both. Jon manages to save himself at the last second, securing survival for him and the redhead. They reach the top, and we get that cinematic kiss with the view of the realm down below. After the near-death climb, Jon and Ygritte descend the wall towards Castle Black, but Orell's jealousy is unbearable. He throws in Ygritte's face that Jon will never truly be one of them. Jon tries to warn her that their attack is suicide, but Ygritte is on that if we die together vibe. Romeo and Juliet on ice. On the other side of the world, Daenerys arrives in Yunkai. The city's leader tries to bribe her with gold and ships to make her leave. Her answer? The dragons give a basic roar to show who's boss.
Perhaps we'll make a slave of you as well. You swore me safe conduct.
I did.
And she demands the release of all slaves or no deal. The Mother of Dragons is not messing around. Theon's nightmare reaches max level. 2 girls enter the cell, untie him, and start seducing him. Seems like his luck turned, right? Wrong. It's all a cruel theater set up by the torturer, who enters the room blowing a trumpet and ends the party. He knocks Theon out and prepares a knife to perform a, let's say, definitive surgery on the Greyjoy's nether regions. It's pure agony. In Harrenhal, Jaime says goodbye to Brienne and heads for King's Landing. But on the way, he discovers that Locke rejected the ransom because the amount was low and threw Brienne into a pit with a bear. Jaime has a burst of conscience, forces the escort to turn back, and finds Brienne fighting the bear using only a wooden sword. The guy jumps into the pit to save her, missing a hand and without a weapon. They make it out alive, and Jaime drops a catchphrase to Locke before leaving with Brienne. Maximum level heroism. To close out, in King's Landing, Tywin gives a lesson on how to humiliate a king without raising your voice. Joffrey tries to assert himself, but Tywin dominates the room, walks up the steps to the throne, and leaves his grandson quiet as a mouse. Who rules the kingdom has become very clear. Arya is still stuck with the Hound, and the tension between them is palpable. She even thinks about smashing his head in with a rock while he sleeps, but Sendor is too smart for that. He reveals they aren't going to King's Landing, but to the twins, where her uncle's wedding is happening, and he intends to sell her back to her family. Across the sea, Daenerys meets mercenaries and tries to negotiate with the Second Sons. Their leader, Marrow, is a first-class jerk and treats Dany like she's nothing.
She licks my ass like she was born to do it.
You, slave girl.
But we have Daario Naharis in the mix, a handsome lieutenant who is quickly charmed by the Mother of Dragons. Result, Daario kills his own bosses, brings their heads as a gift, and swears loyalty and eternal love to Daenerys. Meanwhile, Melisandre performs a bizarre ritual using leeches on Gendry's body to suck out the king's blood. Stannis throws the critters into the fire, cursing his rivals, Robb Stark, Balon Greyjoy, and Joffrey Baratheon. Speaking of Joffrey, the most awkward wedding in Westeros takes place between Tyrion and Sansa. Joffrey makes a point of being the worst human possible, pulling the stool out from under the dwarf during the ceremony and threatening Sansa. Tyrion, drunk and pissed off, threatens to the king, creating a tense atmosphere only Tywin can stop. On their wedding night, Tyrion shows he is a true lord and refuses to touch Sansa if she doesn't want to, but the MVP of the episode is Sam. He and Gilly are in an abandoned hut when a White Walker appears to take the baby. The normal steel sword shatters like glass, but Sam pulls out the dragonglass dagger and, in a moment of pure adrenaline, stabs the monster, which disintegrates into dust. Sam Tarly, the Slayer of Legends. Daenerys conquers the city of Yunkai thanks to an infiltration plan led by Daario, Jorah, and Grey Worm. Jorah is stung with jealousy because Dany is paying too much attention to the new mercenary, but victory is secured. Up in the north, Jon Snow's loyalty is tested. When the wildlings ask him to kill an innocent horse breeder, he freezes, and Ygritte has to do the job. His cover is blown, a brawl breaks out, and Jon kills the War Gorel, who uses an eagle to claw Jon's face before dying. Jon flees on horseback, leaving a furious Ygritte behind. Nearby, Bronn sends little brother Rickon and Osha to hide far away, while he follows his mystical mission. But all of this is irrelevant compared to what goes down at the Twins, the Red Wedding. Robb apologizes to Walder Frey, Uncle Edmure marries the beautiful Rosalind, and everything looks like a party. But when the doors close and the band starts playing The Reigns of Castamere, Catelyn realizes it's a trap. The massacre begins. Robb's pregnant wife, Talisa, is brutally stabbed in the belly. The Stark men are slaughtered. Outside, Arya arrives just in time to see the chaos, but the Hound knots her out and gets her out of there before she dies. Inside the hall, Roose Bolton drives a knife into Robb's heart with the legendary line, "The Lannisters send their regards."
The Lannisters send their regards.
Catelyn, in total despair, kills Frey's young wife and has her thrown right after. End of the line for the king in the north. The nightmare continues at the Twins. The Frey soldiers commit an atrocity involving Robb's body, parading it around like a macabre trophy. Arya sees this scene of horror but escapes with the Hound. On the way, she takes out a rage by killing her first Frey soldier in cold blood with Jaqen's coin, Valar Morghulis. In King's Landing, Joffrey is euphoric with the news and says he's going to serve Robb's head at his wedding feast with Sansa. Tywin Lannister, who runs the show for real, shuts his grandson down and sends him to bed without supper. Tywin drops the truth bomb. Any man who must say, "I am the king," is no true king. We discover that Theon's sadistic torturer is Ramsay Snow, Roose Bolton's bastard. He castrates Theon, sends the part in a box to his father, and forces the Greyjoy to assume the identity of Reek. While Theon's father gives up on him, his sister Yara takes a ship and sets off for the rescue. At the Wall, an unexpected meeting happens in an abandoned castle. Sam crosses paths with Bronn and his group. Sam hands the dragonglass to Bronn, discovers he's alive, and heads to Castle Black to warn Master Aemon that the dead are coming. Jon Snow also gets there, but arrives half dead after taking 3 arrows from his ex-girlfriend Ygritte along the way. The episode closes with Daenerys being acclaimed as a goddess by the freed slaves of Yunkai, who lift her up shouting Misa. The queen's morale is sky high. Meanwhile, Tywin Lannister melts down the Stark's legendary Valyrian steel sword in a total RPG blacksmith vibe. He transforms the giant weapon into 2 new swords and even burns the wolfskin sheath just to make it clear that House Stark is done. He presents his son Jaime with one of the blades, but the mood sours when Jaime refuses to be the heir to Casterly Rock. The father is pissed and basically says Jaime is a disappointment. Meanwhile, Tyrion awaits the royalty from Dorne. The one who shows up is Prince Oberyn, and the guy arrives already already causing terror in a brothel, stabbing a Lannister soldier through the hand. Oberyn makes it clear to Tyrion he's not there to play. He wants the Mountain's head and revenge for the death of his sister Elia. It's pure accumulated hatred. In the Red Keep, Sansa is in major depression, and Jaime gets a golden hand but is rejected by Cersei, who is colder than the winter that is coming. And Arya Stark, she and the Hound enter a tavern full of Lannister soldiers. The Hound drops the iconic line about eating every chicken in the room.
Understand that if any more words come pouring out your cunt mouth, I'm gonna have to eat every fucking chicken in this room.
And the brawl breaks loose. Arya takes advantage of the chaos, recovers her sword, needle, and kills that guy Polliver the same way he killed her friend. Brutal fatality. Across the narrow sea, Daenerys discovers her dragons are in their rebellious teenage phase and almost bite her hand. But not everything is bad. Daario Naharis keeps flirting with the queen using a bouquet of strategic flowers. The romance vibe ends quickly when they find slave children marking the road to Meereen, leaving Dany out for blood. At Dragonstone, the vibe is heavy with Melisandre burning people alive in honor of the Lord of Light, but the title of Psychopath of the Month goes to the north. Ramsay Snow hunts a girl for sport using his dogs, and poor Theon Greyjoy, who now answers to Reek, is forced to watch everything. Ramsay's father, Roose Bolton, returns home and discovers that Bronn and Rickon Stark are alive. He sends Locke to hunt the boys down, while Ramsay continues psychologically torturing Theon, making him shave his own torturer. Max level tension. Speaking of Bronn, he accesses the tree internet and has some crazy visions of the future, including dragons over King's Landing and the throne covered in snow. He now knows exactly where he has to go. Back in King's Landing, Jaime realizes fighting Lefty is impossible and starts training in secret with Bronn, getting his ass kicked repeatedly. And Tyrion, in a painful act, expels Shae from the city, pretending he doesn't love her anymore to save her life. But the main event is the Purple Wedding. Joffrey and Margaery get married, and the Little King takes the opportunity to be the most detestable human being in Westeros. He humiliates his uncle Tyrion with a show of dwarves reenacting the war and then pours wine over his head. But karma arrives on horseback. Joffrey eats a pie, drinks wine, and starts choking violently. He turns purple, falls to the floor, and finally dies in Cersei's arms. Chaos reigns, and of course, the blame falls immediately into Tyrion's lap. With Joffrey's body still warm on the floor, Tywin wastes no time and starts indoctrinating the youngest, Tommen, on how to be a good king. Meanwhile, in the Sept, there's a super controversial and uncomfortable scene between Jaime and Cersei next to their son's corpse. This family's grieving process is complicated, to say the least. Taking advantage of the confusion over the king's death, Sansa flees King's Landing with the court fool Dantos. They reach a ship where none other than Littlefinger is waiting. The Lord shows he doesn't mess around. He orders Dantos killed on the spot to leave no loose ends and takes Sansa under his protection. Back in the capital, Tywin makes a master move and proposes a deal to Oberyn. He offers the Mountain's head and a seat on the small council if the Dornishman serves as one of the judges at Tyrion's trial. In the north, the Hound and Arya find a nice farmer who offers food and shelter, but the Hound, being the Hound, steals the guy's silver and gives Arya a cynical moral lesson on survival. At the Wall, Jon Snow realizes the wildlings are coming and warns that they need to attack the traitors at Craster's Keep before the enemy army gets vital information. To top it all off, Daenerys arrives at the gates of Meereen. The city sends a champion to challenge her army. Daario Naharis volunteers for the 1v1, kills the enemy's horse with a knife, and wins the fight without even breaking a sweat, taking a leak in front of everyone to mark territory. Dany gives an epic speech and catapults barrels full of broken chains into the city. The message is clear. The breaker of chains has arrived. Missandei and Grey Worm are having some tutoring sessions in the common tongue, with a shy romance vibe going on. But duty calls. Daenerys orders Grey Worm and the Unsullied to infiltrate Meereen in disguise, Assassin's Creed style, to spark a revolution from the inside out. The plan is an absolute success. The slaves rebel, and the city falls. But Dany woke up choosing violence. Ignoring Barristan's advice for mercy, she decides to pay them back in the same coin and crucify 163 masters. The message is clear. Mess with her, and the fate is cruel. At the Wall, Jon Snow is suffering more than a fan of a relegated sports team. Alliser Thorne and Genos hate the guy and authorize a suicide mission for him to go hunt the mutineers at Craster's Keep. The surprise is that Locke, the Bolton spy, volunteers to go along, desperate to find the Stark boys. Meanwhile, in King's Landing, Jaime orders Brienne to leave on a quest for Sansa, giving her new armor, Podrick as a squire, poor guy, and the Valyrian steel sword that he names Oathkeeper. And Marjorie, oh, she wastes no time. She sneaks into Tommen's room at night to get into the new king's head, using kittens and friendliness to secure the crown. Far away, Littlefinger confesses to Sansa that he orchestrated Joffrey's death, using her necklace as the murder weapon. The guy is the master of chaos. To close with nightmare fuel, up in the frozen north, the mutineers are living like kings in filth, torturing ghosts and giving babies to the White Walkers. Bronn and his crew are captured by these maniacs, and the final scene is spine-chilling. A White Walker takes the baby to an ice altar and, with a touch, turns the child into a creature with glowing blue eyes. Winter isn't just coming, it's already recruiting. Daenerys discovers that being a conqueror is easy, but being a mayor is the hard part. The cities she freed have already turned into chaos again, with masters retaking power and former slaves being oppressed. Realizing that if she can't control 3 cities, she won't be able to tank Westeros, she decides to stay in Meereen and learn to rule. Basically, she paused the military campaign to play Sim City. In King's Landing, Tywin reveals the naked truth to Cersei. The Lannister gold mine ran dry a long time ago, and the family is deeper in debt than a college student with a credit card. They need the Tyrells to bankroll the party. At the Eyrie, Sansa arrives in disguise, but her Aunt Lysa is completely cuckoo. She loves Littlefinger on an obsessive level, wants to get married right then and there, and forces Sansa to listen to the entire honeymoon, screaming like a banshee. So cringe. But the action is going down in the north. Jon Snow leads the attack on Craster's Keep. Amidst the confusion, Locke tries to kidnap Bronn, but the boy wargs into Hodor and turns the gentle giant into a killing machine, snapping Locke's neck like a twig. Bronn almost reunites with his brother, but Jojen drops a truth bomb. If Jon sees Bronn, he'll want to protect him and stop the Three-Eyed Raven's mission. Heartbroken, they flee. Jon Snow finishes the job in a 1v1 against Carl Tanner, getting beaten until he gets a little help, and sword through the villain's skull. Ghost gets his revenge by killing the last traitor, and the reunion with Jon is the cutest thing in the episode. They burn the House of Horrors and head back to the Wall. Yara Greyjoy makes her Braveheart speech, invades the Dreadfort, and reaches the kennels to save her brother. But Theon's mind is already gone. Now he is Reek. The guy is so traumatized that he refuses to be saved, bites his sister, and runs back to his cage. Ramsay shows up, releases the hounds, literally, and Yara has to flee, declaring her brother dead. Ramsay, the psychopath of the year, gives Reek a bath and asks him to pretend to be Theon Greyjoy for a new mission. Bazaar doesn't even begin to cover it, while Stannis and Davos secure a loan, saving their bankrupt campaign with the Onion Knights smooth talking over in Meereen. The dragon Drogon is growing up and eating the locals' livestock. Dany has to pay compensation and also deal with the son of a master she crucified, realizing that blind revenge brings bureaucratic problems. But this episode belongs to Tyrion. His trial begins, and it's a rigged circus. Witness after witness twists everything until the final blow arrives. Shae, the ex-lover, walks in and lies through her teeth, saying he and Sansa planned everything, humiliating Tyrion in front of the entire court. The dwarf explodes. In one of the most epic monologues in history, he says his only crime is being a dwarf, that he saved this ungrateful city, and that he wishes he had actually killed Joffrey. With hatred overflowing, he looks at his father and demands a trial by combat. Mic drop. The crowd goes silent, and Tyrion has just bet his life on luck once again. In the dungeon, Tyrion is desperate to find a champion to fight for him, but things look grim. Jaime can't fight because he's a lefty now, and Bronn, who is a mercenary but not an idiot, prefers to get married and stay alive rather than face the mountain. Speaking of the monster, Cersei has already secured Gregor Clegane, who is prisoners just as a warm-up. It seems all is lost for the imp. until Oberyn appears in his cell. He wants revenge because the Mountain killed his sister, so he volunteers to be Tyrion's champion. On the other side of the world, Daenerys finally gives Jorah a break and decides to give Daario some attention. The mercenary complains that he's only good at killing and picking up women, and since there's no war, he focuses on his second talent. After the Netflix and chill session, Jorah notices the movement and is left with that look of someone stuck in the eternal friend zone. Meanwhile, Brienne and Podrick meet Hot Pie, who does the best food marketing in the series and drops the info that Arya is alive. But the real chaos is at the Eyrie. Sansa builds a snow castle. The spoiled brat Robin destroys everything and gets the slap in the face everyone wanted to give him. Littlefinger takes advantage of the drama to kiss Sansa. Aunt Lysa sees it, freaks out with jealousy, and threatens to throw her niece out the moon door. Littlefinger arrives, calms the crazy woman down, and delivers the killer line. "I have only loved one woman, only one, my entire life, your sister," and pushes Lysa into the abyss.
Your sister.
Ramsay Snow continues to be the most creative psychopath in the North. He uses Theon, now completely broken and called Reek, to trick the Ironborn and take a strategic moat. Even with the surrender, Ramsay everyone. His father, Roose Bolton, is proud of this horror show and legitimizes the bastard as a true Bolton. Over in Meereen, the gig is up for Ser Jorah. Barristan discovers he was spying on Daenerys for King Robert back in the beginning. Jorah tries to explain, but Dany wants no excuses and banishes him from the city. Game over for the Night of the Friend Zone. In the Vale, Sansa shows she's learned how to play the game. She lies to the tribunal to save Littlefinger's skin and appears later with a dark goth look, descending the stairs ready to take over the world. But the total focus is on the trial by combat. Oberyn enters the arena without a helmet, spinning his spear looking like a fighting game character with an agility build. He humiliates the Mountain, stabs the giant, and demands he confess his crimes against his sister. The problem is Oberyn stalls too long and forgets to finish the enemy. In a brutal twist, the Mountain, even on the brink of death, shatters his teeth with a punch and crushes him with his bare hands, confessing everything. Tyrion and Jaime are in shock. Tywin, showing no mercy, sentences the dwarf to death. The episode is pure tower defense, Lord of the Rings style. The wildlings hit the wall hard, and it's no small thing. There's a giant riding a mammoth trying to break down the gate. Jon Snow takes command while Sam tries to explain to Pip how not to be a coward, but Pip ends up taking an arrow from Ygritte and dies in his friend's arms. The battle is insane on two fronts, atop the wall and in the courtyard of Castle Black. Alistair Thorne, who everyone hates, actually does a decent job leading before getting wounded. Down below, a giant manages to breach the outer gate, and Gren and his bros have to hold the monster back while chanting the Night's Watch vows, chilling. In the middle of the brawl, Jon faces the Fen leader. The bald guy throws Jon all over the place, but our hero manages to find a way and bear hammer in the villain's skull. Then comes the soap opera moment. Jon and Ygritte finally meet amidst the chaos. She points the arrow at him. There's that "I can't kill you" look, but before any kiss happens, the kid Ollie puts an arrow in her. Ygritte dies in Jon's arms, saying they should never have left that cave. The Watch manages to clear the wall by releasing a giant ice scythe that sweeps away the climbers. They survive the night, but Mance's army is still massive. Jon, out of options, decides to go alone into the north on a suicide mission to try and kill Mance. Jon Snow leaves the wall looking like he hasn't slept in days and heads straight for Mance's camp. The tension is high. They drink to Ygritte's memory and talk about giants, but the peaceful chat goes down the drain when Mance realizes Jon is there to kill him. Just as things are about to get ugly, trumpets sound. It's Stannis Baratheon arriving with the heavy cavalry, Gandalf at Helm's Deep style running over the unprepared wildlings. Mance surrenders, and Jon advises that his father, Ned Stark, would have listened to the prisoner. Stannis respects that. Back at the wall, the Watch holds a funeral, and Jon burns Ygritte's body in a heartbreaking scene. Meanwhile, in the frozen north, Bronn and his crew reach the magic tree, but are attacked by skeletons straight out of a Ray Harryhausen movie. Jojen can't handle it and dies, but a child of the forest throws fireballs and saves the rest. They enter the cave and meet the three-eyed raven, an old man fused into the roots who says Bronn will never walk again, but he will fly. In Meereen, Daenerys' life is chaos. A farmer brings the bones of his daughter burned by Drogon. Realizing her children are uncontrollable nuclear weapons, she chains Viserion and Rhaegal in the catacombs, crying her eyes out. In King's Landing, Cersei drops the nuclear truth bomb in Tywin's lap. She and Jaime are lovers and the children are theirs. Tywin goes into denial. Jaime, in an act of supreme brotherhood, frees Tyrion from his cell. But the dwarf, instead of fleeing, goes up to his father's room and finds Shae in his bed. The betrayal hurts, and Tyrion strangles with her necklace. Afterward, he grabs a crossbow and finds Tywin on the throne. On the privy. Tywin calls him a son of a one last time, and Tyrion fires, killing the old man in the bathroom. Happy Father's Day. In the Vale, Brienne and Podrick run into Arya and the Hound. A brutal duel of swords and fists ensues. Brienne knocks the Hound off a cliff. Arya finds the dying Hound, takes his money, denies him the mercy kill, and leaves on a ship to Braavos using the magic coin, Valar Morghulis. Flashback time. We see a mini Cersei visiting a witch in the woods. The girl, sassy from the cradle, demands to know the future. The witch gives it to her straight. She will be queen, but another younger and more beautiful one will take her place, and all of Cersei's children will die. Heavy stuff. Back in the present, Tywin is lying in state, and Cersei is already side-eyeing Marjorie, feeling the prophecy breathing down her neck. Across the sea, Tyrion finally comes out of the shipping crate he traveled in. He's in Pentos with Varys, totally depressed and wanting to drink himself into an alcoholic coma. Varys, the master of persuasion, convinces the dwarf to go to Meereen to meet Daenerys, promising she is the salvation. Tyrion accepts as long as there is wine on the trip. In Meereen, things are ugly. The Unsullied are tearing down statues, but a terrorist group called the Sons of the Harpy starts killing Dany's soldiers. She's being pressured to reopen the fighting pits, but refuses. To make matters worse, the dragons in the catacombs are crankier than teenagers without internet and try to attack their own mother. At the Wall, Stannis wants the wildlings to fight for him. Mance, too proud, refuses to kneel, the punishment being burned alive. Melisandre lights the fire and the mood gets horrific with Mance's screams. Jon Snow, unable to watch the torture, plays the merciful hero and puts an arrow through Mance's heart, killing the guy before the fire consumes everything. Stannis looks dumbfounded, but the message was sent. Arya arrives in Braavos full of hope at the House of Black and White, but the doorman slams the door in her face. After wandering the city killing pigeons and almost getting into a fight, the same doorman appears and changes his face. It's Jaqen, or rather, no one. He finally lets her join the Faceless Assassin Club. On the road, Tyrion and Varys travel in a carriage, looking like a road movie about two opposites. Tyrion complains about boredom, while in King's Landing, dumb bounty hunters deliver random dwarf heads to Cersei, thinking it's him. Qyburn, the court's mad scientist, asks for the head to run experiments. Creepy. Cersei receives a gift from Dorne, her daughter Myrcella's necklace in the mouth of a viper. She freaks out and orders Jaime to fix it. Jaime goes to recruit Bronn, who is about to marry a slightly loopy noblewoman, promising him a better wife and castle. It's the start of Westeros's best buddy cop duo heading on a suicide mission to the south. Brienne and Podrick find Sansa and Littlefinger in a tavern. Brienne offers protection, but Sansa, who apparently hasn't learned anything, refuses. Brienne flees but decides to follow the Stark girl even against her will. In Meereen, Daario Naharis and Grey Worm capture a son of the Harpy. Daenerys wants a fair trial, but a former slave kills the prisoner ahead of time. Dany, wanting to show that the law applies to everyone, executes the former slave in the public square. The people, who previously called her mother, start hissing and throwing stones at her. Drogon appears briefly on the roof, says hi, and leaves, abandoning Mom in the middle of the crisis. At the Wall, Stannis offers to legitimize Jon as a Stark and Lord of Winterfell. Jon is tempted, but refuses out of loyalty to the Watch. In the election for Lord Commander, there's a technical tie between Jon and the annoying Alliser Thorne. Master Aemon casts the deciding vote, and Jon Snow becomes the boss of the whole operation. In King's Landing, a pie of awkwardness is served. Marjorie is now queen, and wasting no time, manipulates young Tommen against his own mother. Cersei, feeling the hit and seeing she's lost control of her son, decides to play dirty. She empowers the so-called High Sparrow, a religious leader who walks barefoot and looks like he hasn't bathed in months, but who commands a fanatical sect. The plan? Arrest the High Septon in a criminal genius or shooting herself in the foot? We'll see. Meanwhile, Sansa Stark returns home. But Winterfell is now practically a house of horrors under Bolton command. Realizing she's going to marry Ramsay, the seasoned psychopath, she freaks out, but Littlefinger sells the idea that she needs to stop running and start getting revenge. And Theon Greyjoy is there, but now he answers to Reek and is more emotionally broken than a fan of a cancelled series. At the Wall, Jon Snow refuses Stannis' offer to become a legitimate Stark, proving he is loyal to a fault. but the highlight is the boss mode moment. Genos disobeys an order and tells Jon to shove his command you-know-where. Jon doesn't think twice, drags the guy outside and cuts his head in true Ned Stark style. Stannis from afar gives that nod of approval that's worth more than gold. To top off the package of misfortunes, Tyrion is living la vida loca in a brothel in Volantis when he gets kidnapped by Jorah Mormont. Sir Friendzone thinks bringing the dwarf as a gift to Daenerys will get the queen to forgive his betrayals. Poor guy. Cersei woke up choosing violence and unleashed the religious fanatics. Now, the so-called faith militant goes around smashing everything in King's Landing, closing and carving marks into people's foreheads. They arrest Loras Tyrell just for being gay, and Tommen, as the most spineless king in Westeros history, can't do anything to stop it, getting humiliated at the temple door.
Filthy bastard!
We'll find another way.
On the other side of the world, we have the dynamic duo Jaime Lannister and Bronn on a buddy cop trip in Dorne. They try to infiltrate to rescue Princess Marcella, but get caught by random guards. A brawl breaks out and Jaime discovers his gold hand is good for parrying sword strikes. Meanwhile, Oberyn's bastard daughters, the Sand Snakes, also plan to grab the princess to start a war. Basically, it's a race to see who kidnaps the girl first. In the north, Melisandre tries to seduce Jon Snow with that power of life talk, but our hero resists because he still hasn't gotten over his ex. Stannis, in a rare moment of humanity, defends his daughter Shireen and her skin disease, proving that even tough guys have a heart. But things really heat up in Meereen. The Sons of the Harpy set up a cowardly ambush for the Unsullied. Grey Worm fights bravely, but the one who steals the show is the old-timer Barristan. The old man fights off about 10 guys at once, samurai movie style, but ends up falling. Grey Worm finishes the last enemy, and the episode ends with the two heroes lying on the ground, leaving us wondering who survived. The mood is heavy in Meereen. Daenerys is furious about Sir Barristan's death and decides to set a mafia-style example. She takes the leaders of the noble families to meet her children. Rhaegal and Viserion make a barbecue out of one of the bosses, and Dany decides to marry Hizdahr to try and calm the city. In addition to reopening the fighting pits, it seems the Mother of Dragons is learning to play the political game. At the Wall, Jon Snow makes the most unpopular decision possible, saving the wildlings before the White Walkers turn everyone into zombies. The Night's Watch hates the idea, and even the kid Ollie gives the Lord Commander the stink eye. Aemon, the Master, gives it to Jon straight: kill the boy and let the man be born. Basically, grow up and step up, kid. In Winterfell, dinner at the Boltons is more awkward than Thanksgiving with that weird uncle. Ramsay forces Theon, now Reek, to apologize to Sansa for killing her brothers.
I'm sorry.
Sorry about what?
For killing your brothers.
But karma is instant. Roose announces his wife is pregnant, and Ramsay's face upon realizing he might lose his inheritance to the new baby is priceless. Tyrion and Jorah's adventure turns into a horror movie when they sail through the ruins of Valyria. They see Drogon flying, Jurassic Park moment, but are soon attacked by the Stone Men, zombies with that contagious skin disease. Tyrion almost drowns, but Jorah saves him. There's just one tragic detail. Jorah looks at his wrist and sees he's been infected, but hides it from the dwarf. The guy is literally rotting from the inside, but his focus remains on his Khaleesi. Total simp. Arya continues her goth Karate Kid phase at the House of Black and White, but most of the training involves scrubbing floors and washing corpses. When she tries to act smart and spy on what's behind the closed doors, the waif, that girl who looks like she hates life, kills her buzz. Jaqen appears to test Arya in a lying game, and spoiler, she sucks at it and gets beaten like a drum. But the girl learns fast, and after helping a sick girl find eternal peace, basically magical euthanasia, she gains access to the hall full of faces. It's bizarre, but Arya digs it.
Dreams her, loves and hates all that makes a girl who she is. Forever.
Meanwhile, Tyrion and Jorah are on a miserable road trip, eating roots and talking about their dead fathers. The mood gets heavy when Tyrion drops the bomb that Jorah's father was betrayed by his own men. Before the family therapy continues, they are caught by slavers. Tyrion, with his speech skill at level 100, convinces the guys not to kill them, but to sell them to the fighting pits in Meereen. Basically, he used the I know a guy logic to get closer to Daenerys. In Dorne, Jaime and Bronn's rescue mission turns into a comedy of errors. They try to grab Myrcella in the garden, but the Sand Snakes attack at that exact moment. It turns into a general brawl until the guards arrive and arrest everyone. Back in King's Landing, Cersei thinks she's a chess master, but she's playing checkers. She sets up Loras and Marjorie to be arrested by the Faith Militant, using the testimony of an ex-lover. Tommen, as always, just stands there looking like part of the scenery. The episode closes heavily in Winterfell. Sansa marries Ramsay in a ceremony colder than winter, and the guy shows he is the worst human being in Westeros by forcing Theon to watch their wedding night in a brutal fashion. It's stomach-turning. In the frozen north, Jon Snow heads to Hardhome on a suicide mission to recruit wildlings, leaving Sam behind. And Sam is having a rough week. Master Aemon dies of old age, a rare achievement in this series. And soon after, Sam gets beaten up by some thugs trying to defame Gilly. Luckily, Ghost shows up to save the day, which earns Sam some points with the girl. In Winterfell, Sansa's situation worsens. She begs Theon to light a candle in the tower to signal for help, but the guy is so psychologically broken that he runs to tell Ramsay. The result? Ramsay flips Sansa's only ally and forces the girl to look at the body. The villain is operating in full sadistic mode. Meanwhile, Stannis is stuck in the snow, and Melisandre, with totally the wrong vibe, suggests that sacrificing his daughter Shireen would be a great idea to stop the blizzard. Stannis tells her to take a hike, for now. In King's Landing, the tables finally turn. Cersei goes to Marjorie's cell to mock her and offer food, but the young queen throws the plate at her. Cersei's satisfaction is short-lived because the High Sparrow reveals that Lancel spilled the beans about her sins. Cersei is arrested and thrown into a cell, proving that karma may take its time, but it never misses.
It's the last thing you'll see before you die.
Over in Essos, Jorah is sold and fights in the smaller pits to try and catch Daenerys' attention. He wrecks everyone without killing them, but when he takes off his helmet, Dany has that "here comes my problematic ex" look. He says he brought a gift. Tyrion Lannister steps out of the shadows. The meeting everyone was waiting for finally happens. We have the clash of titans, Tyrion and Daenerys. The dwarf uses all his charisma to explain that he is the advisor she needs, since she knows dragons but not Westerosi politics. Dany accepts his resume but exiles Jorah again. The guy is in the eternal geographical friend zone. Stubborn, Jorah sells himself back into slavery just to fight in the main arena in front of her. In the bar talk, or rather, wine talk, Dany drops the iconic line that she doesn't want to stop the wheel of power. She wants to break the wheel. In Winterfell, Sansa corners Theon and manages to extract the truth. He didn't kill her brothers, Bronn and Rickon, they were just farm boys. This sparks a flame of hope in her, as the Stark heirs are still alive. But the real show happens at Hardhome. Jon Snow tries to convince the wildlings to join him, which was already hard until the dogs start barking and the snow falls. Suddenly, it turns into a high-speed zombie movie. The army of the dead attacks with full force. It's absolute chaos, people dying, giant punching skeletons. Jon discovers his Valyrian steel sword kills White Walkers, one-hit kill, which even surprises their leader. The escape is desperate, and as Jon and the survivors row away, the Night King pulls the most badass move possible, raises his arms and resurrects all the dead from the battle in a terrifying silence. The message is clear. Winter has arrived and he's not playing around. Jon Snow returns to the wall, bringing the whole crew from Hardhome, including the giant Woon Woon. The tension is thicker than a championship final, and Sir Alliser Thorne only opens the gate out of spite, making it clear this is going to end badly. Meanwhile, in Stannis' camp, the witch Melisandre is staring into the fire waiting for a sign, but the one bringing the heat is Ramsay Bolton. He and 20 good men invade stealthily, burn supplies, and leave the Baratheon army in the mud. Desperate and freezing, Stannis makes the worst Father of the Year decision. He sends Davos to Castle Black to get food, just to get the Onion Knight out of the way. Why? Because Stannis decides to listen to Melisandre and sacrifice his own daughter Shireen on a pyre to please the Lord of Light and stop the snow. The scene is heavy, with the girl screaming for her parents while she burns, and even her mother, who was always cold, breaks down and tries to stop it, but it was too late. Stannis watches it all looking like someone who sold his soul. In Dorne, Jaime Lannister is at a super awkward dinner with Prince Doran. The tension is high. Ellaria Sand pours wine on the floor full of rage, but Doran decides to send Myrcella back home to avoid war. The plot twist? Her fiancé Trystane goes along to sit on the small council. Bronn takes an elbow to the face just to keep him sharp, but goes free. In Braavos, Arya sees none other than Meryn Trant arriving, one of the names on her kill list. She follows the guy to a and discovers he is human trash who likes beating girls. Vengeance is coming. Finally, Daenerys is at the fighting pit in Meereen. Jorah, in the eternal friend zone, enters to fight and prove his worth. Out of nowhere, the Sons of the Harpy start a massacre, Red Wedding style, killing everyone. Dany and her advisors are cornered in the middle of the arena, ready for the end. But then, Drogon, the rebel dragon, arrives spitting fire and turning enemies into barbecue. Dany climbs on his back for the first time and flies out of there like she's an avatar, leaving everyone's jaws on the floor. Karma came for Stannis, and it was expensive. After the horrific sacrifice of his daughter, half his army deserted, his wife himself, and Melisandre fled. He marches on Winterfell only to be slaughtered by the Bolton cavalry. Brienne, keeping her promise, finds the defeated and wounded Stannis in the woods and delivers the final blow. It's over for the rightful king. Meanwhile, Sansa tries to escape the psychopath Myranda. Theon finally grows a spine, throws Ramsay's lover off the walkway, and jumps off the Winterfell wall with Sansa in an insane leap of faith. In Braavos, Arya activates sadistic assassin mode. She disguises herself in the and attacks Meryn Trant, but when she returns to the House of Black and White, Jaqen doesn't appreciate the disobedience. In a bizarre mental battle of face swapping, Arya sees her own face on a corpse and ends up going blind. Severe punishment.
What's happening? What's happening?
In Meereen, with the Queen missing, Tyrion sees Daario and Jorah leaving to find Dany, and guess who shows up to help govern the chaos? Varys the Spider, ready to form a dynamic duo with the dwarf. Far away, Daenerys is lost in the wilderness with her wounded dragon and ends up surrounded by a gigantic Dothraki horde. She drops a ring on the ground as a clue, but the situation is not looking good. On the ship heading home, Jaime has a rare and cute fatherly moment with Myrcella, where she says she knows he is her father and that it's okay. But Lannister's happiness is short-lived. The poison from Illyria's kiss takes effect and the girl starts bleeding, dying in his arms. In King's Landing, Cersei confesses her sins to the High Sparrow and is forced to do the Walk of Shame. They cut her hair, and she walks naked through the city while people throw garbage and curse at her. She arrives at the castle broken, but is received by the zombie Mountain, who is now her bodyguard. But the real shock is at the Wall. Jon Snow is called outside with the excuse of news about his uncle Benjen. It was all a trap. His own brothers of the Watch, led by Thorne and including the kid Ollie, stab the Lord Commander one by one.
Ollie.
For the Watch, Jon falls in the snow, betrayed and dead. Ramsay Bolton shows that romance isn't dead. Just kidding. He cries for his lover, Myranda, but soon orders her body to be fed to the hounds because good meat doesn't go to waste. In the frozen forest, Sansa and Theon are running for their lives, crossing frozen rivers, but the hounds catch up to them. When all seems lost and Theon is about to become dog food, Brienne arrives with Podrick in Berserker mode, saving the day. Brienne finally swears loyalty to Sansa and is accepted. In King's Landing, the joy was short-lived. Cersei runs to the harbor thinking she's going to see her daughter, but runs into Jaime and a covered corpse. Her grief turns to hate pretty fast. Meanwhile, in Dorne, the coup is violent and swift. Ellaria and the Sand Snakes kill Prince Doran and his son Trystane with a spear through the face, seizing power through treachery. Back in Meereen, Tyrion and Varys take a stroll through the city dressed as commoners. Tyrion tries to give money to a starving mother using terrible Valyrian, and she thinks he wants to eat her baby. The mood is tense, and they discover someone burned the entire fleet of ships in the harbor. We are stranded, guys. In the middle of nowhere, Daario and Jorah find the ring Dany left. Daenerys herself is taken to Khal Moro. She tries to pull rank, saying she is Khal Drogo's widow, but it backfires. Now she has to live in a temple of widows in Dothrak for the rest of her life. Depressing. At the Wall, Jon Snow's body is getting cold on the table. Davos and the few loyalists, including Dolorous Ed, lock themselves in a room with the Wolf Ghost, waiting for the attack by the traitors led by Thorne. Davos tries to buy time by asking for food. And to end on a high note, we see Melisandre in her room, completely defeated. She takes off the magic necklace around her neck and reveals her true form. Not the hot redhead, but a lady of about 400 years, who looks like a raisin, crawling into bed to sleep off the eternal sadness. In the north, Bran Stark continues his marathon of visions, Harry Potter pensive style. This time, he sees Winterfell's past and discovers something that boggles the mind. Hodor used to talk. The big guy was named Willis and formed complete sentences, but the nostalgia ends quickly because the three-eyed raven pulls Bran back to reality, basically telling him not to get addicted to VR. Meanwhile, in King's Landing, a drunk makes the classic mistake of bad-mouthing Cersei out loud. The result? The Mountain, now in his Frankenstein zombie version, the guy's head against the wall like it was a watermelon. Jaime picks a fight with the High Sparrow in the middle of the temple, but the old religious guy has more influence in soldiers than it seems. On the other side of the world, Tyrion decides to play How to Train Your Dragon. The creatures are depressed and not eating, so the dwarf, with absurd courage or stupidity, goes down into the dungeon and unchains them. And wouldn't you know it works? The dragons appreciate the gesture and don't turn him into barbecue. The mood really gets heavy in Winterfell. Ramsay Bolton decides to level up his psychopathy. When he finds out his father had a legitimate son, he simply kills his own father, blames his enemies, and then unleashes the on his stepmother and the newborn baby. Yeah, the guy has no limits. In the Iron Islands, Euron Greyjoy appears on a bridge in the middle of a storm, looking like a horror movie villain, and throws his brother Balon off to take the throne, but the ending is what matters. At Castle Black, Davos convinces Melisandre to attempt a respawn spell on Jon Snow. She does the magic, cuts some hair, says some weird words, and nothing. Everyone leaves sad except the wolf ghost. The animal wakes up, and suddenly Jon Snow gasps for air. The man is alive. Jon Snow wakes up from the world of the dead looking like he has a killer hangover. He's full of holes and completely in shock. Davos gives it to him straight. You were dead, and now you're not. Go out there and try not to get killed again. Simple as that. Melisandre is already looking at the guy like he's the second coming of the Messiah. After hugging Tormund and Ed, Jon has some dirty work to do. Hang the traitors. Alliser Thorne keeps his tough guy act, but Ollie just stares with pure hatred. Jon cuts the rope and sends the crew to the other side, but the real surprise comes now. He hands the Lord Commander's cloak to Ed and drops the line, "My watch is ended." The guy literally quit his job after dying. Total mic drop. At sea, Samwell is getting incredibly seasick on a boat, taking Gilly to meet his family, who apparently aren't friendly at all. Bronn goes back to the past and watches a legendary fight at the Tower of Joy. It's young Ned Stark versus Sir Arthur Dayne, a maniac fighting with two swords who looks like an RPG final boss. Bronn discovers that his dad didn't win honorably at all. Ned only won because a friend stabbed Arthur in the back. And from the top of the tower comes a woman's scream that leaves the mystery hanging in the air. Far from there, Daenerys arrives in Dothrak and finds out that the fate of the Khals' widows is to be locked up in a temple for the rest of their lives, chatting with old ladies. The outlook isn't great. Arya keeps getting beaten up while blind, but finally learns to fight Daredevil style. Jaqen offers her sight back if she says her name, but she insists she is no one. Boom. The girl passes the test, drinks the magic water, and gets her vision back. To wrap things up with hate in our hearts, Ramsay receives a gift at Winterfell. Small John Umber hands over Rickon Stark and the wildling Osha on a silver platter, and to prove it's really Rickon, he of the wolf Shaggy Dog on the table. Ramsay smiles that smile of someone about to cause a lot of trouble. In King's Landing, the High Sparrow is playing mental chess with Marjorie, telling little stories about when he was a party animal before becoming a fanatic. He lets her see her brother, Loras, who is broken in the dungeon, but Marjorie tells him to stay strong. Meanwhile, Cersei and Jaime convince Uncle Kevin and Grandma Olenna to stop messing around and use the army to drag Marjorie out of the church by force. Civil war is about to go down in the capital. In the north, the moment every fan has been waiting for happens. Sansa, Brienne, and Podrick arrive at Castle Black. The reunion between Sansa and Jon Snow is a tearjerker. They reminisce about their childhood and eat some terrible soup, but the peace is short-lived. Ramsay sends a letter full of threats describing exactly what he's going to do to Rickon and Sansa if Jon doesn't return her. Jon, who wanted to retire his sword, realizes he's going to have to beat the hell out of the Bolton to take back Winterfell. In the Vale, Littlefinger manipulates poor Robin Arryn into focusing on rescuing his cousin Sansa, and in Winterfell, Osha tries to pull a fast one on Ramsay, attempting to seduce him to grab a knife, but Ramsay is vaccinated united against treachery and slits her throat while peeling an apple with the utmost tranquility. In Meereen, Tyrion tries to negotiate with the slave masters, giving them 7 years to end slavery. Missandei and Grey Worm think the idea is terrible, and the locals are furious with the imp, but the show belongs to Daenerys. Jorah and Daario try to stealthily rescue her, but she has a better plan. Lock the sexist calls inside the temple. They threaten to but she doesn't even blink. Instead, she knocks over the braziers and sets the whole hut on fire. Since she has the fire immunity cheat code, the cows die screaming while she just chills. The door falls and Daenerys walks out of the flames, naked and unburnt. Everyone kneels immediately. The Mother of Dragons has regained her army and respect through fire. Sansa reunites with Littlefinger and immediately tears into him, flanked by Brienne. She wants to know if he knew Ramsay was a complete psychopath. The guy tries to deflect with his usual smooth talk, but Sansa doesn't buy it and tells him to get lost, although she accepts the intel that her uncle has retaken Riverrun. At Castle Black, Team Stark begins to form. Jon, Davos, Tormund, and Melisandre plan to unite the northern houses. Sansa lies to her brother about the source of the uncle intel, but gifts Jon a new cloak, Ned Stark style, to give him that leader look. On the other side of the world, Arya continues her bizarre training and has to watch a play that mocks her own father's death and portrays her sister Sansa in a very unflattering light. It's stomach-turning, but she focuses on the mission to investigate the lead actress, Lady Crane. Meanwhile, Jorah, the king of the friend zone, finally confesses his feelings to Daenerys and reveals he's turning to stone with grayscale. He tries to leave to die far away, but Dany orders him to find a cure and return. In the Iron Islands, the election for the new king takes place. Yara gives a strong speech backed by Theon, but their uncle Euron steals the show, admits he killed the previous king, and promises to build a giant fleet to marry Daenerys. The crowd buys into it, and Yara and Theon have to flee with the best ships before they end up dead. But the gut punch comes at the end. Bronn decides to ward alone in a vision, and bumps into the Night King, who touches his arm and breaks the cave's magical protection.
He saw me! The Night King! He saw me!
The army of the dead invades everything. The Wolfsummer sacrifices himself. The three-eyed raven dies, and in a mind-blowing temporal confusion, we discover Hodor's tragic origin story while he holds the door for his friends to escape. That's trauma for life. Mira is running on fumes, dragging Bronn through the snow, when a mysterious rider appears to save the day. It's Uncle Benjen Stark, back as a half-undead, half-hero, to stop them from becoming zombie popsicles. Meanwhile, Sam arrives home with Gilly. His mother and sister are sweethearts, but his father, Randall Tarly, is that toxic relative nobody deserves. He humiliates Sam at dinner and freaks out when he finds out Gilly is a wildling. Tired of bowing his head, Sam decides to leave, but not before cleaning house and stealing Heartsbane, the family's Valyrian steel sword. Nice revenge. In King's Landing, Jaime arrives with the Tyrell army thinking he's going to bring order to the house and stop Marjorie's walk of shame. Except the High Sparrow is slippery as soap. He announces a holy alliance between the crown and the faith. King Tommen, always impressionable, bought the whole pitch and appears with the faith symbol on his chest. Jaime is left looking like a fool, loses his job in the Kingsguard, and is sent away to lead a siege. Arya watches the end of the play, but her conscience weighs heavy. Instead of poisoning Lady Crane, she saves the actress and points out the jealous rival. The waif, who is spying on everything, runs to snitch to Jaqen, who authorizes the hit. Arya retrieves her sword, needle, and hides in the dark, ready for a fight. Oh, and Daenerys reunites with Drogon, climbs on the dragon, and gives a fiery speech to the Dothraki, naming everyone her blood riders. The woman is unstoppable. Believe it or not, Sender Clegane, the Hound, is very much alive. He's on a peaceful vibe, helping build a church in the woods with a chill Septon. But an ex-assassin's joy is short-lived. While he's chopping wood far away, some bandits from the Brotherhood the entire community. The peace and love phase goes down the drain instantly, and he grabs an axe. Medieval John Wick mode activated. In the north, Jon and Sansa start their tour to beg for armies. They go to Bear Island and meet Lyanna Mormont. The girl is 10 years old and has more attitude than many bearded kings. Davos manages to convince the little giant, and they get 62 soldiers that are worth 1,000. However, at House Glover, they get a rude no slammed in their faces. Desperate with the low numbers, Sansa writes a mysterious letter behind Jon's back, back, smells like Littlefinger in the air. In King's Landing, Marjorie keeps pretending to be the perfect devotee in front of Septa Unella, but slips a drawing of a rose to Grandma Olenna, proving she's still loyal to House Tyrell. Olenna gets the message, delivers one last legendary burn to Cersei, telling her she's already lost everything, and gets the hell out of the city before it blows back on her. In the Iron Islands, in Volantis, Yara tries to cheer Theon up with booze and a plan, get to Meereen before their crazy uncle and seal a deal with Daenerys. The episode ends tensely in Braavos. Arya buys passage to go back home, but lets her guard down, admiring the view. The waif appears disguised as an old lady and stabs the girl without mercy.
Sweet girl.
Arya jumps into the river, escapes bleeding through the streets, looking at everyone with fear. Things just got ugly. Arya Stark is enjoying some local theater, but the mood drops when Lady Crane, the only nice person there, becomes a memory thanks to the waif. A deadly game of tag begins through the streets, with the waif chasing Arya like the T-1000 from Terminator 2. Arya, covered in wounds, lures her enemy into the dark and uses the advantage of having trained blind. The result? The waif's face goes onto the wall of the Faceless Men, and Arya tells Jaqen to get lost. She is a Stark, and she's going home. In Meereen, Tyrion tries to force a friendship with Grey Worm by telling bad jokes, but the stand-up comedy is interrupted when the Masters arrive bombarding the city. Luckily, Daenerys arrives mounted on Drogon just in time to handle business. The situation in King's Landing is tense. The Mountain protects Cersei by a religious fanatic's head off with his bare hands, but her son, Tommen, decides to get in the way and bans trials by combat. Goodbye, Cersei's Plan A. Meanwhile, the Hound is in medieval John Wick mode, grabs an axe and goes around killing whoever massacred his friends, until he finds the Brotherhood without banners and sees justice being served at the end of a rope. Over at Riverrun, Brienne tries to negotiate diplomatically but fails. Jaime Lannister, however, uses the dirty tactic of threatening to launch Edmure's baby via catapult. Edmure caves and hands over the castle. The legendary Blackfish dies fighting off screen, while Brienne escapes by boat, exchanging that sad little wave with Jaime. In Meereen, Daenerys decides that ship barbecue is the dish of the day. The dragons burn the enemy fleet in a pyrotechnic show. And Grey Worm slices up the insolent Masters in the blink of an eye. Yara and Theon Greyjoy arrive shortly after, and in a quick chat, seal a naval alliance with the Mother of Dragons. But things really heat up in the north. It's time for the Battle of the Bastards. Ramsay starts his mind games and makes Rickon run across the field. Unfortunately, the kid skipped the class on how to run in a zigzag and gets arrowed right in front of Jon. Jon Snow, in a total Leroy Jenkins moment, loses his cool and charges alone against the entire army, almost getting trampled by his own cavalry. The battle turns into a claustrophobic carnage with a wall of bodies style World War Z. The Boltons surround the Starks, and it looks like the end, until Sansa pulls a Gandalf arriving at Helm's Deep. She shows up with Littlefinger and the Knights of the Vale, who run over the enemy lines. Ramsay cowardly flees to the castle, but the giant Woon Woon, the real MVP of the match, knocks down the gate before falling. Jon Snow invades and takes out all his pent-up rage, turning Ramsay's face into pate with a ground and pound worthy of the UFC. But the final revenge belongs to Sansa. She visits her sociopathic ex-husband in the kennels and lets his own cute pets have dinner. Goodbye, Ramsay. No one will miss you. Arya Stark serves a special dinner to Walder Frey, Sweeney Todd style, a pie filled with his son's. Afterwards, she reveals herself and slits the old man's throat, avenging the Red Wedding with a smile on her face. In King's Landing, Cersei decided she wasn't going to any trial and activated Michael Bay mode. She blows up the Great Sept with wildfire, taking out the High Sparrow, Queen Marjorie, and half the nobility. King Tommen, watching the disaster from the window, decides that flying without wings is the only way out and jumps. With no heirs and no patience, Cersei takes the Iron Throne as the official Mad Queen, while Jaime arrives, giving the side eye to the mess she made. In the north, Davos discovers what Melisandre did to Princess Shireen and demands her head. Jon Snow decides to just exile the Red Woman to the south. Shortly after, Lyanna Mormont, the fiercest kid in Westeros, lectures the Old Lords until everyone acclaims Jon Snow as the new king in the north. Bronn uses the tree dial-up internet to go back to the past and confirms the theory everyone was waiting for. Jon isn't Ned's son, but a baby born at the Tower of Joy, protected so Robert wouldn't kill him. Sam arrives at the Citadel and drools over the giant library like Belle seeing the beast's gift. And to close the season, Daenerys dumps her boyfriend Dario, gathers her dragons, her armies, and Tyrion as Hand of the Queen, and finally sails toward Westeros. The hype is real. Here things start heating up, or rather, poisoning up. At the Twins, old Walder Frey gathers the whole family for a feast, but his speech turns into a nightmare when everyone starts dropping dead after drinking the wine. Plot twist: Walder is actually Arya Stark using that bizarre face magic. She leaves a legendary message for the survivors. Winter came for House Frey. Revenge completed successfully. Arya continues her journey and bumps into Lannister soldiers. Instead of stabbing everyone, she ends up sharing food and wine with them in a campfire vibe, laughing at the idea that she's on her way to kill the queen. Little do they know, in the north, Jon Snow is in apocalypse manager mode. He orders everyone, men and women, to train to fight against the White Walkers. Little Lyanna Mormont, as always, steals the show and shuts up the grumpy old men, supporting the decision. Sansa and Jon have that basic sibling argument about how to rule, but Jon puts his foot down. Down south, Cersei is painting maps on the floor and realizing she's surrounded by enemies. That's when Euron Greyjoy arrives with a giant fleet and a marriage proposal. Cersei refuses because the guy isn't trustworthy, but he promises to return with a gift to prove his worth. Meanwhile, at the Citadel, Sam Tarly is living the worst intern life possible, cleaning chamber pots and serving soup, but he breaks into the restricted section of the library and discovers there's a mountain of dragonglass at Dragonstone. He rushes to warn Jon. The episode closes with Daenerys finally stepping onto Westeros. She enters the empty castle of Dragonstone, tears down Stannis' banners, and drops the catchphrase, "Shall we begin?" Chills. The tension is high at Dragonstone. Daenerys corners Varys about his loyalty, and the bald man delivers a beautiful speech about serving the people. She accepts but warns him, "Betray me, and your barbecue." Melisandre shows up talking prophecies, and Tyrion convinces Dany to invite Jon Snow to the party, since the Starks hate the Lannisters too. At the War Council, Dany's allies, Yara, Ellaria, and Olenna, want to set fire to King's Landing, but Tyrion, playing the humanitarian strategist, suggests besieging the capital and sending the Unsullied to take Casterly Rock. Olenna gives it to Dany straight. "You are a dragon, be a dragon."
You're a dragon. Be a dragon.
Grey Worm and Missandei star in the romantic scene of the moment before he leaves for war, with things getting intimate. Meanwhile, at the Citadel, Sam decides to play underground doctor. He tries to cure Jorah Mormont's grayscale in an agonizing scene that will make you lose your appetite. In Winterfell, Jon receives Sam's letter about the dragonglass and decides to go meet Daenerys, leaving Sansa in charge, much to Littlefinger's delight. Arya reunites with Hot Pie, finds out Jon is king, and changes her route towards home. On the way, she gets surrounded by wolves and finds Nymeria, but the direwolf ignores her and walks away, leaving Arya bummed out. The ending is pure chaos at sea. Yara and Ellaria's fleet is ambushed by crazy Uncle Euron. Euron kills the Sand Snakes, captures Yara, and challenges Theon to save her. Theon has a trauma flashback, panics, and jumps into the sea, abandoning his sister. What a monumental fail. Euron Greyjoy arrives in King's Landing, parading like a hero, bringing his gifts, Yara, Ellaria, and Tiani Sand. Cersei loves the surprise. In the dungeon, the queen delivers her most sadistic revenge. She kisses Tiani with poison in front of her mother, condemning Ellaria to watch her daughter die slowly. Extremely heavy classic Game of Thrones level. In Winterfell, Sansa is killing it in management when she gets a visitor, Bronn Stark. The reunion is kind of weird because Bronn has turned into the three-eyed raven and looks like an emotionless robot, saying bizarre things about his sister's past, which freaks her out. Finally, the meeting happens. Jon Snow arrives at Dragonstone. Tyrion welcomes the Northerners, and there's tension in the throne room. Daenerys wants Jon to bend the knee. Jon says, "Not today," and tries to warn them about the ice zombies. No one really believes him, but Tyrion convinces Dany to at least allow the mining of dragonglass as a gesture of good faith. The strategic war heats up and fails. The Unsullied invade Casterly Rock using a sewer tunnel Tyrion knew about, but discover the castle was empty. It was a trap. Euron's fleet appears and burns their ships, leaving Dany's army stranded there. Where was the real Lannister army? Attacking Highgarden, Jaime and Bronn wipe the floor with the Tyrell army. Jaime finds Lady Olenna, who knows she lost the war. He offers a painless poison, and while she drinks it, the old lady drops an atomic bomb. She confesses to Jaime that she was the one who killed Joffrey. The episode ends with Olenna pulling a legend move for the last time. Tell Cersei, I want her to know it was me, and Jaime looking like a fool. In Winterfell, Littlefinger tries to gain favor with Bronn Stark, handing over that Valyrian steel dagger that almost killed the boy in Season 1. Except Bronn is totally in a Dr. Manhattan vibe, completely emotionless, and drops the line, "Chaos is a ladder," leaving Littlefinger in shock. After all, that was his line. Mira Reed realizes the Bronn she knew is gone and decides to bail. Meanwhile, Arya finally arrives home. The guards try to stop the girl, but she uses her ninja skills to get in and reunites with Sansa in the crypts. The mood is a bit strange, but emotional. Soon after, the three Stark siblings reunite. Bronn, still in robot mode, gives the dagger to Arya. Later, Arya decides to train with Brienne and humiliates everyone, showing she's become an elite assassin. Leaving Sansa and Littlefinger worried. At Dragonstone, Jon takes Dany to see some cave paintings, proving the White Walkers are real, but the Queen is pissed because she's losing allies and wants to use the dragons to burn everything. But the action really explodes when the Lannister army, led by Jaime and Bronn, is returning with the gold. Suddenly, they hear a thunderous noise. It's the Dothraki horde arriving, and to make matters worse, or better, Dany arrives mounted on Drogon, setting fire to everything. It's an open-air barbecue. Bronn tries to play hero using that giant scorpion ballista and hits the dragon, but only makes the beast angrier. In the end, Jaime has the brilliant idea to attack Dany alone while she helps the dragon. Drogon prepares his fire breath, and at the last second, Bronn tackles Jaime into the river so he doesn't turn to ash. Bronn pulls Jaime out of the river before he drowns in that heavy armor. The two realize fighting dragons is suicide. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, Dany is ruthless. Bend the knee or die. Randall Tarly and his son Deacon decide to play tough and refuse to surrender. Result? Dracarys on them, turning to dust instantly, which makes Tyrion very uncomfortable. In Winterfell, Bronn uses his Raven drone powers and sees the Night King marching. Arya starts suspecting Sansa, thinking her sister wants power over the North all for herself. Littlefinger, of course, takes the opportunity to sow discord and makes Arya find that old letter Sansa wrote while forced by Cersei. The sisterly feud is set. At the Citadel, Sam is tired of being ignored by the Masters who think the undead are a legend. Gilly even reads a bombshell about the annulment of Rhaegar's marriage, but Sam is so annoyed he doesn't even pay attention, steals some books, and leaves. The strategy now is insane. Capture a zombie alive to prove to Cersei the danger is real. Davos manages to smuggle Tyrion into King's Landing to talk to Jaime and takes the chance to rescue Gendry, who has finally stopped rowing. The lad is ready for a fight with a warhammer, Robert Baratheon style. In the end, the Suicide Squad forms at Eastwatch by the Sea. Jon, Tormund, Jorah, Gendry, the Hound, Beric, and Thoros. An unlikely group setting off beyond the wall to hunt an undead in the middle of the ice. What could go wrong? The mood in Winterfell is heavy. Arya confronts Sansa with the letter, and the tension is worthy of a thriller movie, with the younger sister threatening to borrow Sansa's face. But the focus is in the north. The Suicide Squad is walking in the snow and chatting about nonsense until they get attacked by a zombie polar bear, which mauls Thoros. They manage to ambush a smaller group and capture a zombie, but the thing screams and calls the Night King's entire fan club. The gang gets stranded on a rock in the middle of a frozen lake, surrounded by thousands of dead. Gendry, who turned into the Flash, runs back to send a message to Dany. Thoros dies of the cold, and when the lake refreezes, all hell breaks loose. The situation looks lost until Daenerys arrives with the three dragons cleaning house on the army of the dead. Beautiful scene, fire everywhere, but the Night King isn't playing games. He grabs an ice spear and, with Olympic precision, hits Viserion in the air. The dragon falls dead and sinks into the lake. It's heartbreaking. Jon stays behind in the confusion, but is saved by Uncle Benjen, who sacrifices himself himself so Jon can escape. On the boat back, Jon, all battered, holds Dany's hand, calls her my queen, and the romantic mood finally happens amidst the grief. The episode closes with the worst possible scene. The Night King orders Viserion to be pulled from the bottom of the lake and resurrects the dragon. Now the villain has a blue-eyed dragon. The tables have turned completely. The tensest HOA meeting in Westeros finally happens at the Dragon Pit. On one side, Cersei and her crew. On the other, Daenerys' squad with Jon Snow. The atmosphere is heavy, UFC weigh-in style. To prove the danger is real, the Hound does the most terrifying unboxing in history. He releases the white they captured. The thing goes straight for Cersei, who almost has a heart attack. Faced with the horror, everyone agrees to a truce, but Cersei demands the North not pick sides after the war. Jon, with his absurd, Stark-level honesty, drops the bombshell that he has already sworn loyalty to Daenerys. Cersei gets pissed and leaves. Tyrion, the only decent diplomat there, goes to talk to his sister and discovers she is pregnant, managing to convince the queen to back down, or so it seems. In Winterfell, Littlefinger thinks he's manipulating Sansa against Arya, but the spell turns against the sorcerer. In a delicious plot twist, the Stark sisters unite, expose all of Baelish's crimes, and Arya does the dirty work, sending the manipulator to the afterlife. It was about time. Bronn and Sam put the puzzle pieces together and discover the bombshell truth. Jon isn't a bastard. He's the legitimate son of Rhaegar and Lyanna, meaning the guy is the heir to the Iron Throne. Meanwhile, unaware that they are aunt and nephew, Jon and Daenerys finally get it on in the ship, and to wrap it up with a golden key, or a nice one, the Night King arrives riding the zombie Viserion and melts the wall like butter. Opening the door for the apocalypse to walk in. Daenerys' army arrives in Winterfell, and the reception is cold, literally and figuratively. Sansa looks at Daenerys with that face of someone judging her soul, Mean Girls style. The North doesn't like outsiders, and political tension is through the roof. At least we have cute reunions. Jon sees Bronn again, and finally, Arya. Daenerys notices the dragons aren't eating right and takes Jon for a ride. The guy, kind of clumsy, mounts Rhaegal, and they go for a romantic spin in the sky. How to Train Your Dragon style, having no idea the dragon only accepted him because he's a Targaryen. Down south, Euron returns with the Golden Company, but Cersei is disappointed because they didn't bring the elephants she wanted so badly. Priorities, right? Theon takes the opportunity, rescues his sister Yara in a super fast stealth mission, and heads to Winterfell to help the Starks. The mood drops completely when Sam finds out Dany executed his father and brother. Sad and revolted, he runs to tell Jon the truth in the crypts. Bro, you are the true king, Aegon Targaryen. Jon is in shock, and since misery loves company, Jaime Lannister arrives alone in Winterfell, and the first person he sees is Bronn, the boy he pushed out of a window in season 1. The universe has a cruel sense of humor. Jaime is in the hot seat at Winterfell, surrounded by people who hate his guts. Daenerys and Sansa want the Kingslayer's head, but Brienne steps up to defend him tooth and nail, and with honor, ensuring he stays to fight. The tension eases up a bit, and everyone starts preparing for what might be the last night of their lives. Arya finds Gendry and decides she doesn't want to die without knowing what it's like. She doesn't waste any time, and things get steamy in the forge. Meanwhile, in a room with a fireplace, we get the best gathering of random characters in the series. Tyrion, Jaime, Brienne, Podrick, Davos, and Tormund drinking cheap wine. Tormund, completely lacking self-awareness as usual, tells the story of how he became Giantsbane. But the golden moment is when Jaime breaks tradition and knights Brienne as a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms.
Arise, Brienne of Tarth, a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms.
It's impossible not to get emotional seeing her smile. In the crypts, Jon finally works up the courage and tells Daenerys the truth. So auntie, I'm Aegon Targaryen, and I have a claim to the throne. She looks like she's seen a ghost and lost her crown at the same time. But before the lovers' quarrel can escalate, the horn blows. The Night King and his infinite army have arrived. The party's over. The war has begun. The tension in Winterfell is so thick you could cut it with a knife. Everyone is in position waiting for the army of the dead, and the vibe is pure terror. Out of nowhere, nowhere, Melisandre rides in, says a prayer in Valyrian, and boom, transforms the Dothraki Eryx into flaming lightsabers. The cavalry gets confident and charges into the darkness, looking like an insane light show. The problem is, the show is short-lived. The lights go out one by one in the distance. Silence returns, and then comes the tsunami of zombies, World War Z style, trampling everything. Daenerys and Jon, riding the dragons, try to find the Night King, but the White Walkers unleash a blizzard that blinds everyone. It's total chaos. Dragons bumping into each other in the sky, zombies scaling the walls, and people dying left and right. In the crypts, where they thought it was safe, seriously, hiding in a graveyard against the necromancer, the dead kings of winter rise and start attacking the women and children. Tyrion and Sansa can only watch in horror. In the courtyard, Lyanna Mormont proves that size doesn't matter. She takes on a giant zombie all by herself. He crushes her in his hand, but she uses the moment to dragon glass into his eye, taking the monster down with her. An absolute legend. Meanwhile, Arya does a stealth speedrun in the library, fleeing from the dead. Beric sacrifices himself to save her and the Hound, and upon meeting Melisandre, we are reminded of the classic line, "What do we say to the god of death? Not today." The climax hits when Jon knocks the Night King off his dragon. Daenerys hits him with a Dracarys right to the face, but the villain walks out of the fire intact with a smirk. To make matters worse, he raises his hands and revives everyone who died in the battle. Jon gets surrounded. Theon, defending Bronn in the Godswood, gets his total redemption before being killed by the boss. The Night King goes to kill Bronn, but Arya appears out of nowhere with a ninja leap. He grabs her by the neck, but she drops the dagger, catches it with her other hand, and buries in his gut. Game over. The Night King shatters into crushed ice, and his entire army collapses. Humanity won, but the cost was massive. After the frozen brawl, Winterfell turns into one big collective funeral. After the tears and the pyres, the victory feast begins. Daenerys, a master political player, legitimizes Gendry as a Baratheon and Lord of Storm's End. The guy is so happy he runs to propose to Arya, but we know Arya wasn't born to be the lady of any castle, so she lets him down with class and a goodbye kiss. Gendry, promoted and friend-zoned in the same night. Meanwhile, the alcohol kicks in and Jaime finally goes to Brienne's room. There's that tense, will they, won't they vibe, until they actually do. But the peace is short-lived. Daenerys begs Jon to keep his secret about being a Targaryen. Jon, with his unshakable and dumb honor, says he needs to tell his family. He tells Sansa, Bronn, and Arya, swearing them to absolute secrecy. Sansa holds on to the info for exactly 5 minutes before telling Tyrion. The royal gossip spreads faster than wildfire. They decide to head south to drag Cersei off the throne. Jon sends Ghost to the north with Tormund, without even petting the dog. Unforgivable mistake. But arriving at Dragonstone, Daenerys' fleet gets ambushed. Euron Greyjoy, using some kind of aimbot, lands 3 giant scorpion bolts in Rhaegal, who falls dead into the sea. The fleet is destroyed and Missandei is captured. At the gates of King's Landing, Tyrion tries to negotiate peace, appealing to Cersei's motherly love. But the lioness isn't playing around. She tells Missandei to speak her last words. She-loyal advisor screams Dracarys, basically telling Daenerys to burn it all down. The mountain cuts off Missandei's head in front of everyone. The look on Daenerys' face isn't sadness, it's pure hatred. The war is personal now. Varys tries to double-cross Daenerys by spreading the truth about Jon, but Tyrion becomes the biggest snitch in Westeros and turns his friend in. Result, Varys becomes dragon barbecue on the beach. Daenerys, sensing she doesn't have the people's love, nor Jon's, who rejects her romantically again, decides she'll rule through fear instead. The Targaryen coin flip seems to have landed on the wrong side. The battle begins and it's a one-sided massacre. The Golden Company is vaporized by Drogon in seconds. The Lannister army, realizing you can't tank a dragon, throws down their weapons and surrenders. The city bells ring, signaling total surrender. The war is over, right? Wrong. Daenerys looks at the castle, snaps completely, and decides to cosplay the Mad King. She takes off and starts torching the entire city. Soldiers, women, children, everything turns to ash. Grey Worm follows the leader and starts executing surrendered soldiers, while Jon tries in vain to stop the carnage. Amidst the apocalypse, we get the long-awaited Clegane Ball. The Hound and the Mountain meet on the crumbling castle stairs. The fight is brutal, complete with eye and the revelation that the mountain is an immortal zombie. Sendor, accepting his fate, tackles his brother and throws them both off the wall, straight into the fire. Jaime finds Cersei in the dungeons, but the exit is blocked. They die embracing each other as the castle ceiling collapses on top of them. Arya spends the whole episode in a survival horror movie, escaping falling buildings and watching people get incinerated at every corner. She tries to save a mother and daughter, but they end up burned by the dragon. In the end, covered in dust and blood, Arya finds a white horse inexplicably alive amidst the rubble. She mounts up and rides out, leaving behind the smoking ruins of what was once King's Landing. Daenerys won, but at what cost? King's Landing has turned into a post-apocalyptic setting worthy of Fallout. Tyrion walks through the rubble and gets the confirmation he feared most. He finds the bodies of Jaime and Cersei buried. The dwarf breaks down in tears, realizing the escape plan went terribly wrong. Outside, the vibe is terrifying. Daenerys gives a speech to her troops that would make any villain in history jealous, promising to liberate the whole world through fire and blood. Tyrion, finally waking up to reality, throws his hand of the kingpin on the ground in front of everyone and gets arrested for treason. In jail, Tyrion gives it to Jon Snow straight. His aunt-girlfriend has lost her mind. He convinces Jon that if he doesn't act, Sansa and Arya are going to end up as barbecue too. Jon goes to the throne room, where Dany is admiring the Iron Throne for the first time, totally deluded into thinking she's creating a paradise. Jon tries to reason with her, but realizes there's no turning back. He pledges loyalty, gives her a big kiss, and stab, shoves a dagger into the queen's heart. Daenerys dies in his arms. Drogon arrives, senses the tragedy, and in a moment of poetic fury melts the Iron Throne with fire. After all, if his mom can't sit on it, nobody can. The dragon grabs her body and flies off. Weeks later, a great council meeting takes place with the Lords of Westeros. Grey Worm wants Jon's head, but Tyrion suggests they choose a new king to decide. And then comes the most random plot twist. Tyrion says no one has a better story than Bronn the Broken. Everyone agrees, and Bronn becomes king of the Six Kingdoms, since Sansa demands the North's independence. The ending is a big, everyone goes their separate ways. Arya decides to play Christopher Columbus and sail into the unknown. Sansa is crowned queen in the North, and Jon is exiled to the Night's Watch. The series ends with life moving on, Tyrion leading the small council, and Jon heading to the real North with the free folk, and finally, giving Ghost that well-deserved pat.